The ex officio member, Coordinating Board Chair Bob Shepard, and other board members in attendance today are the Vice Chairman of our board, Whit Ryder, and Fred Heldenfeld. Welcome, everybody. Also, I want to welcome Commissioner Paredes and Deputy Commissioner David Gardner. Let's see. I'm looking for some other people, but I don't see them, so. Since we're being broadcast live over the internet today, I'll also welcome our webcast audience. The next item on our agenda is a review of our committee's agenda for the January 2008 Coordinating Board meeting. First of these is Agenda Item 2A, discussion of the committee's recommendations relating to the proposed Texas College Readiness Standards. Our schedule for addressing the standards is as follows. For today's meeting, we will take no action on this item. We will simply discuss the current draft, prepared, as you know, by vertical teams of teachers from secondary and post-secondary education. And we'll also discuss the comments on the draft that were received during the 30-day public comment period, which just ended on December the 10th. Based on the public comments and today's discussion, the vertical teams will meet again, and the staff will prepare recommendations for our committee to consider at a special called meeting on January the 15th. At that meeting, we will receive the Commissioner's recommendation, and we will determine our committee recommendation to the full board at our January 24th meeting regarding the adoption of the College Readiness Standards. To begin our discussion today, Dr. David Conley will review the key steps in the development of these draft standards and report on the public comment process. Just stage right. Dr. Conley, I was just introducing you. For our new members, Dr. Conley's organization is EPIC, the Educational Policy Improvement Center at the University of Oregon. Dr. Conley's staff facilitated the vertical team's work and is providing the agency with data from the public comment period that ended December 10th. After Dr. Conley's remarks, our own Evie Hyatt will discuss our next steps. Dr. Conley, you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you today and share a little information. What I'm going to do is move through this presentation rather quickly. There's a lot in it, and I apologize for that complexity of this, but there's really no way around that, so I'm going to just try to hit the high points of this for you, and my plan is to make sure we get to have the point where you can have your interaction. I know you'll have a lot of questions about this, so let's just move to the next slide, and I will start going. Just to recap the College Readiness Standards development process, they were mandated by House Bill 1, developed by vertical teams through 4 meetings in February through August, presented on the 25th of October, and then up for review from the 25th of October through the 10th of December. We've also done supporting technical analyses with that. So I want to be clear that with the public comment period closing on Monday, that we were still receiving data as of Monday evening from that and from technical analyses. So what you'll find here is that our staff worked diligently to put all of this together in a form that we can share with you, but I want to caution that I haven't had a chance to double-check data, and I almost never do this, get up in front of a group without having a chance to have double-checked every piece of information. So we have to, I'm going to caution you against reaching any specific conclusion or citing any specific number from this presentation, but in the interest of trying to help the process move along, I'm willing to share with you, even though we're on this extremely tight timeline.
Well, thank you. We understand that.
Well, just to review what came out of this public review process, we used an online method whereby people could log in and provide us with, they did a review of the College Readiness Standards by each item of the standards. In other words, each idea, each organizing concept, each performance expectation, each performance indicator had a separate line, and you could indicate whether you agreed or disagreed with it. You could also give us comments, and the comments were available a space at the end of each section of the document. In other words, of each organizing concept, at the end of the organizing concept, there was a text field into which you could enter comments. You could also upload a document at the end, or you could submit a document separately to the coordinating board. We ask people to identify their affiliation, and I'll share that with you in a moment. Our next step is to summarize all the materials for the vertical teams so that they're ready to move quickly to try to identify changes that they'd like to make in the standards. We also, EPIC contracted with a group, Mid-Continent Research for Education and Learning, which is the premier organization in the nation that deals with standards analysis. And we asked them to conduct a series of technical analyses that would support the public input process so that the vertical teams would have the benefit of both the public reaction but also some technical analysis that compared the draft standards to a number of reference points. And the most important among them are that the comparison of the draft standards to the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, because a lot of discussion has been going on about whether or not the standards that we're producing for college readiness have we stated everything we need to state in them? Do they have enough detail in them? Do they align with what's taught in high school? These are some of the crucial elements of the system of standards for college readiness. So we wanted to be able to share with the vertical teams and eventually with the board the relationship of the standards, of the college readiness standards, to the TEKS. We also took a look at the relationship of the college readiness standards to 3 exemplary standard systems: California, Massachusetts, and then Achieve. Once again, this has come up as an issue, the degree to which the draft college readiness standards are aligned with or consistent with what we've seen in quality standard systems around the country, so we did a comparison there as well. And we also received from the Commission for a College-Ready Texas documents in English Language Arts and Science and Social Science recommending some changes. And we commissioned, as part of the analysis that McCrell did, that they would compare the draft college readiness standards with the CCRT versions, and so we could see how they fit together, because they were received, as you know, at the last moment, and even though if they're great documents, we still want to be we want to conduct our due diligence and be very careful and cautious and review them comprehensively and see how they relate to the work of the vertical team. So those documents were also examined as well. And then we've summarized the comments by topic and item. That will be an additional product. So the process then involves all of these elements being reviewed and transmitted to the co-chairs. They then consider the major areas for potential changes. And they go through a process that's on a very tight timeline. I've outlined the major pieces of it here. The result will be that the vertical teams would review all of this information, decide if they want to make changes, and that they would then come up with recommendations that go to the Commissioner of Higher Education, who would consult with the Commissioner of Education, decide if any other modifications are necessary. That would then come back to this group, I believe, and then ultimately to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board on January 24th. I've included in much more detail the steps that are remaining, and I'm not going to go through them for you at this moment. Please feel free to consult them. If you have questions about those steps, please, you can direct those to Evie or to myself. I've included it in the spirit of transparency because I think it's important to understand the process, to have it not be mystified or not have the illusion or the a sense that something's occurring behind the curtain. This is, it's clear here how we're going to conduct the analyses and transmit the information, and how the role of the co-chairs, the role of the vertical teams, the role of the Commissioner's office in processing this information. So we'll go ahead to slide 10 now. Just going through those several slides that have the steps in more detail. And take a look now at some of the results from the process. The first slide summarizes for you the types of people who participated in the process who identified themselves. And not everyone did identify themselves, but about 800 of 900 did select a category to identify themselves. And as you can see, the largest group is 2-year higher education, followed by 4-year higher education. That's about 550 out of the 800 or so. You also see that you have K-12 participation and even some students as well. And we think this is a good sign that we had this level of participation from these communities, because these are the people who are most affected, particularly the post-secondary community is affected by these standards, and their participation in this is, I think, really crucial, that they have ownership in this, they have buy-in, they have involvement. And as you'll see, they have been, their participation was very thoughtful participation. So I move on then to take a look at a little more detail.
Dr. Hunt, can I ask, the students, are those K-12 students or those higher ed students?
We don't know. We just said student. Some of the students self-identified as high school. There was a lot of high school students that showed up in one area, and we thought it might have been a class assignment to go do this. That's a guess on our part. But they identified themselves. So I'm on slide 11 now. Just by subject area, you can see that you had more people completing the English section here than the others, but when we get to the comments, you'll see that the comments are don't necessarily correspond to the number. Now, these are people who filled out a form, and by a form, what I mean is they went through and they did the agree-disagree on all the items. So we had 271 people who expressed their agreement or disagreement with the ELA standards and so forth. On the next slide, on comments received, what you'll see is that the number of comments, as I noted, is not necessarily proportional to the number of participants. And in science, we did pick up quite an uptick in the last week or so of comments, and you'll see that that's the area where we see the greatest number of comments, although the other areas are proportionally more similar in nature. But over 3,000 comments, and I just want to offer a couple observations about the comments. I've read most of them. I've skimmed all of them, and I've tried to read in detail most of them. All of these comments will be read in their entirety with care and caution, and to be categorized by 3 separate analysts, in addition to the co-chairs and the vertical teams. We are paying careful attention to these comments because, and we can make them available if anyone on the committee would like to see them. They're very thoughtful. And they're not always, I mean, sometimes, one person has one view and another person has another point of view. Sometimes you can have differing, it's not as if every comment can be incorporated, but they're thoughtful comments. And if you take a look at a database of these comments, what you find is it's not full of sort of extraneous comments or things that are off topic. There's a few of those, but not many. These are really on point. And we would also note, and I've noted on the slide, that a number of these comments, it's clear that they've been submitted on behalf of a group of people, not an individual. So in some senses, I think it even increases the spread and the range on this, that it appears that different academic departments in particular have gotten together and looked at them and then submitted one set of comments as an academic department, which makes sense if you think about it, not each person in the department. I think this is a case where the liaisons that have been, who have been identified and commissioned to work at each of the campuses in the system have done their job. These are faculty members whose responsibility it was to communicate about this process to their colleagues and peers, and it appears that they did that quite well, and that their peers did then respond and participate and provide the kind of input that you see in these comments that, as I mentioned, are very thoughtful and detailed and content specific. Just to give you a feel on the agreement with all of the statements, in other words, all of the standards, all the organizing concepts, all of the performance expectations, and all the performance indicators. When we sum up all of the responses across all 4 of the levels in our system, what we find is that right around 90% of the respondents agreed with these. The agreement rate, a better way to put it, the agreement rate is around 90%. The highest agreement rates on any individual item were 100%. The lowest rates were in the sort of 60+%. We didn't have any item where the majority of people disagreed with it. And you can see it averaged out to be right around the 90% point. In other words, very, very high degree of agreement by the people who submitted who completed forms. Very high degree of agreement with pretty much every one of the statements. Now moving now to a more to the next dimension of this analysis. Here's the range of materials that will be provided to the vertical teams. As I mentioned, the public input that we've received, agree and disagree, we're going to, so that'll be a place where they can identify if there were some comments that had less than 90%, if they're in the 80 and 70% range, they can look more closely at those and see the comments that are associated with them and try to determine if there's something about that particular statement, that whether it's a performance expectation or whether it's a performance indicator that caused people concern. In general, if there were concerns, they tended to be at this performance indicator level. Now let me just review for you. I'm sure you're familiar, but the way that we have structured this, the first three levels, the standards, the organizing concepts, and the performance expectations, is what the board adopted for review on October 25th. That's what will come back to the board to adopt as policy on January 24th. The performance indicators are subject to continuing revision as we learn more about what's going on in actual college classrooms within Texas, and as we get more examples of how those, of what an appropriate set of indicators would be. However, a lot of our comments and a lot of, when there's areas of concern, a lot of times are directed at that indicator level, which means that we've got a really good dialogue and discussion going on about how best to manifest these types of learnings. So it's an interesting situation where we can accommodate and acknowledge that type of concern and debate and dialogue and continue to work on those performance indicators even while the basic three levels of the standard system are more stable, are less subject to sort of serious critique by the respondents. So we provide this input on the reactions, the comments we receive by theme and category. We've also worked with McCrell to have them generate potential recommendations that derive from the comments. Given that our very short timelines, which I kind of skipped over a little bit and didn't go into detail, but you can see that to get from December 12th to January 15th, we've asked people not to schedule anything for Christmas or New Year's, so just make themselves fully available. But you can see that we're going to have to move relatively expeditiously during that period of time. So our organization is trying to do supportive analyses to help the vertical teams, and one of those is possible recommendations that come out of all of these comments and observations. And so McCrell has produced that document as well. And as I mentioned before, we're going to share a document that integrates the draft college readiness standards with the CCRT recommendations in ELA and social science. So it's a way to take the best of what the vertical teams came up with and the best of what CCRT recommended and see if we can put them together into one coherent document. However, I should emphasize, and along with the alignment studies, I should emphasize that the vertical teams are free to do whatever they wish in terms of their recommendations. They can use, not use, ignore, adopt anything that they want out of all of this. Our job is to provide them a reference with the resources. Their job is to decide how best to use it. I've included some more detail in here, maybe more than we want, but I wanted to make sure I got down to the level of showing you what some of the things have been coming out of the comments. So I gave you examples of comments by themes, not necessarily individual comments, but some of the themes that came up in each of the subject areas. And you'll see in English, for example, focus more on knowledge and skill rather than activities. Instead of naming two pre-writing strategies, you want to use appropriate pre-writing strategies. Get off the curriculum side and get onto the standards performance side. You can see higher education faculty indicating their desirability of having students enter college. There's a lot of support for these. When you read through the comments from the post-secondary faculty, just a tremendous amount of, well, if my students could do this, my students could do half of this, I'd be happy. I mean, there's a real sense that this is what they want and what they need, and that there is a gap between what's going on in high school and what's going on in college. It just gets reinforced over and over and over again. At the same time, throughout all of the subject areas, there's a sense that asking high schools to do this will be challenging. I think we need to be clear. If this was not challenging, we probably wouldn't need the standards in the first place. If high schools were doing all of this, we wouldn't need readiness standards. So the idea that some folks will reach the conclusion that this is going to be challenging for high schools shouldn't be a surprise to us. It's probably a positive sign. Now, I don't mean that at all as a criticism of high school. As a matter of fact, I think the high school folks are very often enthusiastic and excited about the idea of having the post-secondary system actually make clear what students need to do so that the high school people can have a better chance of making that happen. And as you'll see, just in the, I put in a series of examples so you can see the range of specificity, from very general to very specific. And you'll see changing standard American English to edited American English or something. At this fine-grained specific level, many examples like that were very fine-grained and specific. In mathematics, we did not have a chance to analyze those entirely. That's still ongoing. Having read the comments earlier, I can tell you that a lot of the mathematics comments are relatively technical, relating to very specific mathematical properties or techniques and whether they should be included and how they should be phrased. And also a more general discussion about statistics and data analysis and where they should really be taught. Is this a high school level thing? Do statistics and data analysis really prepare students for college level math? That would be the sort of a point that we're asking to consider. In science, we have quite a large number of science college readiness standards to begin with. If you recall, we have not only the subject areas, but we also have science and society. We have cross-discipline themes. We have basic principles of science. So it's quite a complex section of our standards. And what you see here is that, as you would expect, a lot of the suggestions, as you noted, over 1,000, were very specific. Here, in this particular type of, when you're dealing with nucleotides, you should think of them this way as opposed to that way. And we need to include hydrocarbons in this as opposed to, you get the idea. So that is very useful, I think, for the vertical teams to refine the specificity and the clarity of their expectations and standards. But there's also another theme that runs through that, which is, are we writing the standards for science majors or for just the average student coming into college? And I do think we should revisit that point at some point in the future and consider doing what we did with the standards for success, which is identifying which standards are really important for students who want to major in science and which are really important for all students. And I would recommend that we not get involved into an either-or situation where we either write the standards for science majors or we write them for all students. I believe we can have them apply to both, and that we can provide further guidance to high school teachers and students on which standards are most important if you're a science major and which ones are most important if you're simply a student who's going to go on to college and needs to be literate in science. As you can see, lab materials and other issues about what students actually need to master in high school. It may be that students need to master a subset of all of this, the conceptual side of it, and that the college will fill in the detail. Social science, because the social science standards are so conceptual in nature and are so cognitively rich, we saw more concern about that they might be too ambitious for high school students. And I have to say that this reflects the notion that high school students don't really have the ability or the opportunity necessarily in high school to develop their thinking capabilities and capacities as much as might be desirable. So we have, at the very least, the view that, well, students are not doing a lot of this in high school, but also the view they may not be able to, and I think that's an untested assumption. Nevertheless, moving on to some of the other points here, the performance indicators were critiqued for their specificity and the kinds of content that was mentioned in them. That very often the performance indicator mentioned a specific historical event or a specific social or sociological phenomenon, and those were subject to a lot of scrutiny and criticism. A number of respondents mentioned the need to consider more U.S. history, more focus on source documents that underlie the U.S. Governmental system. And then a final area was more research skills for students while they're in high school. The cross-discipline area was the one with the strongest support. People really felt that these are important, but also that they're going to be challenging for students while they're in high school. And also that some of these skills run beyond academics, that students need to manage their time and so forth, and we should pay attention to that. The cross-discipline skills, the other critique that comes up on those is whether or not to integrate them back into the subject areas. This is an interesting sort of philosophical position. We pulled them out on purpose. Well, then there's some redundancy with specific statements within some of the subject areas. And some people, of course, found that annoying. Well, you stated it here. Why don't you put it back in the subject area? That's certainly it's an observation that did not escape our notice, I guess I should say. But it's a question philosophically whether you want to emphasize these by putting them on their own. Moving on to the technical analyses, an example, just one example, I think, to give you a feel for these technical analyses. Here's an example of where we compared the ELA and mathematics college readiness standards to other exemplary standard systems. And we took a look at what was absent and what additional content were found in the other standard systems. Our comparators were ADP, American Diploma Project, CB is College Board, I forgot to mention those earlier, and MA is Massachusetts, and CA is California. And you'll see in ELA, for example, we found 14 college readiness standards not addressed in any of those documents. We also found at least 23 that were not in the CRS that were in at least 2 of the comparison documents. This is just to give you a feel for how we do this type of a crosswalk, and then the vertical teams can look at that and see if they want to then include something or rewrite something based upon those types of observations. The comparison of the college readiness standards to the CCRT material then, as I mentioned earlier, will generate a third set or a third document that integrates the two. If we can move on here, I'm going to come back to an example of that later. This is just a bit of it. This just shows you the methodology. When we analyzed the TEKS against the college readiness standards, we used a 5-point scale, whether the TEKS was a prerequisite, whether it was identical, whether it was more difficult, in other words, whether it had increased cognitive complexity, or whether you couldn't determine the relationship, or whether there was an indirect one. And you'll see that just a summary of the results from this. 4 out of 185 of the TEKS were rated more difficult. The rest were either equivalent or prerequisite. So in ELA, you can see we have a very good match as far as we're not asking people to do a fundamentally different thing. We're probably asking them to do some things in more depth. We're reinforcing what the high school has expected. Similarly, in mathematics, 47 were rated as prerequisite, and 41 were rated as more difficult, and we can take a look at why that would be. Sometimes it's an expression of how you use the particular information. And just moving on to science, 81 of 580, so we have quite a few TEKS in this area, were rated as prerequisite, and 67 as more difficult, but most were rated as kind of equivalent. So what we're finding is a lot of similarity in the content statements, which really means that the important thing to do will be to come up with demonstrations of what college readiness means that go beyond the standard statement. If we rely on the standard statement alone, it'll read a lot like or similar to a high school, a TEKS level statement. Now we have to provide more depth. That's what Phase 2 does. It goes out and it gets the examples of what college level work is. But this also suggests that in places that rather than having to provide more and more details in the college readiness standards, we can rely on the assumption that more of that detail work, more of those details will be spelled out in the TEKS. That is the relationship between the two systems, is one has that increased detail. And in the social sciences, 44 were rated more difficult, 32 were prerequisite, and 31 were equivalent. But here's one where we had a lot more difficulty because 45 were rated as unable to make a judgment, and 28 were not found in the TEKS. So we'd say right now that probably our least aligned set of standards is the social science, because social science took a different philosophical position. And I think we have to be careful not to decide that's wrong because we didn't find the alignment. The social science view analyzed based on what are the cognitive skills one needs to process across a range of social sciences. And the TEKS are based on content knowledge within the social sciences. We have to be careful not to decide that the college readiness is just a matter of restating the same content knowledge that the TEKS had. However, we want to be clear enough on sort of a framework of content knowledge so that we don't express this as just thinking skills. But keep in mind that the two are different conceptions of social science. Here's an example of the technical analysis that was done. So you can see here in writing, you've got in the left-hand column is the college readiness standard draft. In the right-hand column is a summary by McCrell of what the comments said, and then a recommendation for revising that particular CRS based on the comments. So it's not an editorial decision by an analyst. This is based on what the comments recommend. So this is trying to synthesize and summarize the recommendations in the comments. And you'll see that here the recommended is revised to focus on knowledge and skill rather than specific activity. I mentioned that for you earlier. If we go on in mathematics, another example here, the comment suggested making explicit that students should have these formulas memorized on determining perimeter area and so forth. And so a recommended restatement that clarifies. In science, then, a similar example to show you how we're trying to provide some specificity to help guide the vertical teams as they do their revisions. And you can see that, for example, on the second one, that the comment suggests that hydrocarbons are too advanced, so clarify that the examples of types of simple molecules and simple hydrocarbons are expected. And it's a relatively straightforward clarification, but it helps to make that more clear. It helps to make it clearer what's expected. The next example is let's move on to the next one. Thanks. The college readiness standards against the CCRT, and this is how the college readiness draft standards and the CCRT were integrated. So once again, this is way too much text. I don't really want to try to go through this with you. What I'm trying to do is make a point. The point is that you can see on the left-hand column that each of the current CRS standards is indicated by Roman numeral, number, and so forth, letter. And then in the right-hand column, the integrated versions refer back to which of the standards have been combined or integrated. So that we also have this with track changes in a Word document so that a reader could easily follow what the recommended integrations were. But you can see also that the analysts who looked at this did believe there were ways that you could combine the two documents to achieve a certain parsimony and hopefully a greater clarity. Keeping in mind that as good as each of the documents were, we didn't really have a chance to think about them and look at their relationship in the time available. So this was a kind of a step back and take a look type of a process. So that will be made available to the vertical teams. And the next steps is for us to complete our analyses. We will post the resource documents to a secure download site where they'll be available to the vertical teams. And then we will work to support and facilitate the work of the co-chairs and the vertical teams. So I apologize for the complexity of this, but I really wanted to emphasize the work that's going into this. The kind of criticisms that come up after a process like this are that it was done slipshod, or it was done without a lot of thought or care, or that it was somebody went in a back room and wrote something on the back of an envelope. And I mean, I've heard all of these sort of stories, and I think it's very important that we be transparent and clear about this, that this is a systematic process. There's a lot of thought and analysis that's going into this, and that we think the results we got from the public input process were very helpful and very valid results from key stakeholders. So with that, I'll entertain questions that you have.
Thank you, Dr. Conley. If it's okay with everybody on the committee, I would like to have Evie's comments, and then we can direct comments and questions to both of them, if that's all right. Okay. Evie?
First of all, let me just tell the board members that you will be getting a copy of this presentation. You can tell it's hot off the presses, so we didn't have time to get them for you yet. So, first of all, this presentation is going to be on the recommendations and on the purpose of the, if we could go to the next slide. The purpose of the presentation is twofold. We're going to talk about the recommendations that we are making, and we're also going to talk about some of the actions that the coordinating board is taking to assure that there will be a smooth implementation of the recommendations that are being recommended. I have to tell you that the recommendations we're proposing in January are quite bold, but so is the College Readiness Standard Initiative. So we're hoping that we have equaled that in what we are recommending. There will be 3 recommendations proposed in January. The first is that you adopt the revised college readiness standards that you'll be getting at your next AER meeting in January. Second, we are asking that the college readiness standards be used to develop the cut scores for the Texas Success Initiative for the entering college class of 2012. Finally, we're proposing that the board charge staff with developing new options that provide innovative opportunities for students who have not reached college readiness standards. While we could initiate those without a specific recommendation and support from the board, we believe that such an action would reflect your commitment to the college readiness standards and to assuring that we meet the goals of closing the gaps. The board staff is creating a long-range action plan to successfully implement the proposed recommendations, and most of the ones you're going to be seeing us talk about today have already gone to the Agency Ops Committee and have been approved by that committee in October. First, when we talk about adopting the revised college readiness standards, probably the most important point there is completing Phase 2 and Phase 3 of the EPIC work that they'll be doing for us. Phase 2 is the gap analysis that's going to take place. After that is done, we're going to be asking, and you'll be getting a report from Dave at the July meeting of the board on the gap analysis between the college readiness standards and entry-level courses that are currently offered in Texas institutions. After that, we're going to ask that the board incorporate the college readiness standards into board rule. I think you know that on the TEA side, on the public education side, the Commissioner of Education will be approving the college readiness standards. So this would be a parallel action on the part of the board. We also, as part of Phase 3 of the College Readiness Standard Project, we're going to be reviewing the entry-level courses in relation to the college readiness standards, and that will also cause us to review the expectations we have of freshmen and of core curriculum courses. The next slide indicates what we are doing with faculty to make certain that faculty at both public and higher education are prepared to be implementing the college readiness standards. Both of the options on this slide focus on professional development. The first one is really something that our faculty can be doing by themselves. We are contracting to have web-based options on the cross-disciplinary standards. And I think you saw that there was a great deal of support for those in the public comments. And there are also some concerns about how students are going to be able to do this. So we want to make certain that there are opportunities available for professional development in that area. The second option that's on that slide is we want to work in a rather large professional development project that will be working with teachers who cover what we're referring to as a transition points. In mathematics, it would be teachers who go from Algebra 1 through college algebra. So your public and higher education faculty would be working together in regional teams to look at how you're going to spread out and articulate the curriculum. In English, it would go from English 1 through your English 1301 composition courses. The next set of activities focus on assuring that the TSI, the Texas Success Initiative, incorporates the college readiness standards by 2012. The first thing that we're going to do after passage of the college readiness standards is initiate a test alignment study so that we can determine if the instruments that we currently have are appropriate measures for the college readiness standards. We're going to determine if there are some instruments that are better than others, and we're going to determine if some new instruments are necessary. And these are perhaps the most important of the activities that we're undertaking, because this is where you're going to see the assessments that are going to be implemented to assure that that class of 2012 is prepared and that we are appropriately assessing them based on the standards. The next set of opportunities are to pilot opportunities for students who are not college ready. I think that you all know that our record with developmental education completion and the continued success of students in post-secondary opportunities is not as high as we would like it to be. And we're looking at some new ideas to see how we can enable both students and faculty to be prepared for the college readiness standards. One of the things that was brought up earlier today was about some form of developmental education in high schools. And we just want to remind the board that one of the activities that was just passed and mandated in the last session of the legislature requires the TEA that the coordinating board work with the Texas Education Agency to create courses at the senior level for those students who have not achieved the college readiness standards by the 11th grade. But we're going beyond that, and we're hoping that we can possibly pilot some one-year certificate programs where students could be earning college credit while they're earning some workforce skills that would enable them to then successfully go on to college. We're also looking at some institutional redesign efforts, and again, these were all activities that we received approval for from the Agency Ops Committee. There are other activities that we're going to be looking at, and I know that Dr. Conley mentioned the P16 special advisors. We are planning on keeping them actively engaged in the whole process so that our high school faculty and, more importantly, the higher ed faculty understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it. So we're hoping to initiate a quarterly e-newsletter to the P16 special advisors so that they'll be able to share information from the coordinating board to the rest of the faculty. Coordinating board staff from the commissioner on down has been offering presentations at various meetings for faculty and administration meetings, and we also are going to be presenting with the state and regional associations with members of TEA staff. The college readiness standards also, finally, are being incorporated into many of the initiatives you've heard us talk about, into course redesign, into the core curriculum and field of study. We're looking at technical courses that are leading to certificates to make certain they incorporate the college readiness standards. And we're also, of course, looking at colleges of education and the curriculum, the teacher ed curriculum. These are some of the actions that board staff will initiate to oversee the successful implementation of the recommendations that you're going to consider in January. And if you have any questions or comments, we'd be happy to take them now.
And Dr. Conley, we've received weekly installments of the comments, and we've reviewed the various drafts we've had so far of the college readiness standards. So we appreciate how arduous, and if I might say so, elegant this work has been, and we appreciate it very much. So, members, any comments or questions?
I had a question about in each of the four categories and even the cross-discipline category, there is this thread that you alluded to about expectations too sophisticated, level of difficulty, what content best left to college, standards too advanced for high school.
Have you run a correlation to where those comments are coming from? Are they coming from a particular cohort, i.e. high school educators and administrators versus post-secondary, or is it spread across the board, or is it
No, once again,
students running a campaign on their own?
Yeah, it'd be pretty clever if they did that. Once again, because the comment period closed at noon on Monday, we haven't done any secondary analyses at all. And it'll be tough to do what you're describing because of the coding, the way the coding, we'd have to go through and hand-code it because things aren't coded in numerically like that. In other words, we didn't code by topic, then by person. So we'd have to do that by hand. So I don't know that we're going to be able to answer that exact question. I can just, where you can see it to some degree is where the comment themselves, where the writer indicates who they are. We do have the identity of the writer next to the comments, and so you can tell if it was normally you can tell if it was a college person or high school person by the label. In other words, it's their name and then their institution if they gave it. Not everyone did. You can also sometimes tell by the text itself they indicated. And I'm hesitant to generalize, but it seems that there's a little bit on both sides of the fence, that some high school people feel that way and some college people feel that way, about the standards being really challenging.
But anecdotally, I think earlier you made the comment, I don't want to misinterpret or put words in your mouth, but this particular thread that runs through these topics is not particularly surprising to you because
No,
you're trying to elevate standards.
Better, yeah. I mean, if it wasn't there, you'd really have to wonder if you'd hit the right mark on your readiness standards.
Well, sort of along those lines, the Commission for College Ready Texas did a crosswalk, I believe, through several additional standards than what you indicated in your analysis, and pretty much the standards in all 4 categories came out very closely aligned. And from what I understood, the co-chairs for the ELA have decided to incorporate the differences between what CCRT came up with and what the vertical teams came up with. As I understand that correctly, Commissioner. So we have a lot of alignment between a secondary body that did independent research and what the vertical teams came up with. I thought that was very encouraging. Really, we have a lot more crosswalk than just what EPIC has done. So that's great. Along what Fred was asking about regarding TEKS, I'm kind of surprised that we didn't come out with more variations. If TEKS is not where it needs to be, then does it really give us a good benchmark about being encouraged that we had a lot of alignment? Because your comments were, we have a lot of alignment, so that's kind of good, you know.
Well, my
we're trying to elevate
observation,
the standards.
my observation is about the specificity issue was what I'd heard being the problem with the TEKS, is that people didn't say, I hadn't heard people saying that they were wrong. I'd heard that they weren't specific enough. And for example, in something like English language arts, I think it is encouraging that you're in the same ballpark, that you're viewing literacy in the same way, you're viewing writing in the same, as having the same general components. My understanding, the critique of the ELA TEKS is that they want to go back and make them much more specific for high school teachers. And at that point, they may, it's impossible, they may not align as cleanly at that point if they are much more specific than the college readiness standards.
Okay, so that would enable measure, though, accountability, if they're more specific in terms of what we mean by college readiness. Is that correct?
Well, the plan with the college readiness standards is not to try to get the specificity through the writing of the language of the standards as much as it is through the examples of the student work that's college-ready work, and then to try to annotate the work, in other words, to show which college readiness standards the work represents, so that if you had a 3 to 5 page research paper, you'd be able to show which college readiness standards it contained and how they look in practice, because the problem is some of these statements of these standards, you just can't get specificity beyond a certain point because it has to do with the actual sort of the conceptual difficulty of the material or the level of kind of thought or how well you integrate a reference into a paper.
Okay. So then we can say we're doing a good job by making some more recommendations on specificity within the TEKS and taking it to the next level, it sounds like.
You'd be, yes, by the summer, you'd want to be able to have a set of materials that that someone who is versed in English language arts could look at the materials, look at the annotations, and see the relationship between those and what the kind of work that would be produced by a student who would achieve the TEKS. This is, in the parlance of standard setting, this is called bookmarking. There's a way that you can have examples of pieces of student work and see where along the continuum of student work you have set your standard. So this would be, it's the next step after you specify your standard. It's the operationalization of the standard.
Okay. And Abby, I know, this is enormous work as it is. At what point, and do we stay involved as these readiness standards are filtered through the rest of the pipeline in the pre-K through 9?
Well, according to the, I think I understand what you're saying. According to the law, we are involved in it. According to the law, we're involved in it from beginning to end. The vertical teams, they switched from a 60-40 to a 40-60, 40% higher ed, 60% public ed. But the next phases are professional development, instructional strategies, curriculum alignment. So our team and our involvement in that will be continuing throughout. I think what happens after this point is we are focusing more on making certain that the colleges are prepared and ready for the students.
That's clear in some of the...
But we will be working with public ed. We intend to continue to work with them to complete the mandate.
And I guess visibility into that, Madam Chair, will be important for us as don't drop the ball on that piece either.
I think Debbie has a timeline already written out for all of it.
I think it's worth noting that, once again, Texas is the only state in the nation really that's attempting to do this exact method of alignment. And so I think you're going to find a lot of challenges as you try to do that with what's called backward mapping. It's going to be challenging, but the systems aren't used to this.
Right. Well, I know Commissioner Scott at one of our commission meetings mentioned he's not sure if we're going to go backwards or forwards starting, So I know there's still some debate with regards to how to approach it, but nevertheless, needs to be done. So.
Well, if you want to make sure you get to college readiness standards, that suggests to me that you have to work backwards from the standards. Otherwise, if you work from some other points, you may not get there. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Laurie.
Dr. Herman, why is it that the cut scores for the Texas Success Initiative are not going to be revised or adopted until 2012? I mean, why is it? I mean, it seems to me like we're in the entire high school. I know.
Well, and unfortunately, he has to pass that one off to me. First of all, it is a tradition, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, that any change that goes into effect would start with the 9th grade students.
Okay, so it's a phase-in.
Yeah, and also, that is the first group of students, and again, I know you're familiar with this, that the Student Success Initiative that started with that group of kids, I guess they were the class of 2000, that the TEA has been tracking, that's their graduating class.
Okay.
So,
They were the first ones to take the tops in the 3rd grade.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right,
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
There's an 8th grader in the class of 2012. Poor things.
We've been following her.
Little guinea pig.
And as we look at the college readiness standards, will that be the tail wagging the dog that will eventually eliminate TEKS as we know it, and TEKS will be something new, or will it tweak?
I kind of doubt, my opinion is I kind of doubt it. I think that high school and college are not the same yet. I don't know if they're going to be, but ever. But just by the fact that they're governed by 2 different boards, you're going to have 2 different systems for a long time. I think what you're doing is laudable. I think it's commendable. I think it's extremely difficult. And I think if you're able to put all this in place by 2012, you'll be doing a great job, actually. So.
Maybe
And
another
there
way
are
to ask.
several representatives from TEA here.
I think we have joining us Lizette Reynolds, Deputy Commissioner of the Texas Education
Hi.
Agency. Hi, welcome.
Hi. I think I want to respond as far as the college readiness standards. I mean, the standards you developed, the statutory authority resides with the State Board of Education to develop the standards, and the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. I didn't hear the rest of the question, so but I did want that to be made
We're
pretty
not going to
clear.
be doing away with it.
She said something about replacing the
Well,
TEKS. Right.
will it be the tail wagging the dog? In other words, if we have college standards that everyone seems to agree on, and that the state board would be implementing those recommendations, and then we have TEKS and they don't happen to align, or that they need to be revised, that was my question. Is that, will we look at TEKS and say, gosh, we really, the curriculum that's expected of students...
I think the State Board of Education, and it'd probably be better if the chairman was here, because they're a separate entity from the TEA, but I think what they would say is that they would review the college readiness standards as part of their process for for revising the TEKS.
That's pretty much my question. I mean, I know that it's not our responsibility for the TEKS. I'm well aware of that. But it just seems to me that if we're talking about two different entities, the only way to get them aligned is for someone to take a look at it and say, we need to make changes.
I mean, I think that's what this process has been about.
And along with the cut points, we know that with tax currently, that the passing score does not guarantee college success, and yet every child that passes is eligible to apply to a college or university, and that is the graduation requirement. How do we feel that end-of-course exams, will there be cut points, or is an end-of-course exam an end-of-course exam? And how do you see that as I'll use the word guaranteeing college success?
Every end-of-course test is going to have a college readiness component. And we are part of that process. We work with TEA on creating that component of the test. So it would be, I feel, I don't believe there have been any discussions, and I suspect it's way premature for us to figure out what the scoring mechanism would be on that. But there will be items where you can tell, I'm assuming where you'd be high school complete, and then they're going to be the college
Like a
readiness.
mastery level
Correct.
and a passing level or
And
something like
yes,
that?
and those exams are all, if you want to go
Well, I
on.
mean, I think that's all right now being discussed with our testing contractor, and I know that there are some RFPs out on end-of-course exams, and so I think from that perspective, I don't know what it's actually going to look like.
And another question that actually came to me from a school board member in the Greater Houston area, if SATs don't test the science and social studies, the end-of-course exams is going to be the one dependent on it. Is that correct? Because that a student taking an SAT for college entrance is going to already have that based in end-of-course exams. So that would be the mastery, or that would be the college readiness benchmark there, but it wouldn't be, is it tested on ACT, or there'll be other tests, or is it just end-of-course exams?
Well, it is currently, I mean, ACT does test in some of those areas, and it is more curriculum-based than the SAT. But I think that's part of what our studies are going to be about, to see if there aren't other instruments out there that are appropriate for college readiness testing, or if there's going to have to be some development of those over and above the end-of-course test. One of the things we, of course, always have to remember is there are students who are starting in college who are not graduating high school students. So we have to make certain we have opportunities for them to take assessments and have instruments available to them.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, for Dr. Conley, as I look at the profile of the respondents, the number of comments exclusive of the student category are about 5-to-1 higher ed versus public ed. As you looked across the, obviously we got a good statistical sampling up there on the higher ed. On the public ed, as you read through those comments, do you think that we got a broad representation of perceptions on the standards based upon this snapshot of respondents?
Well, once again, I'd have to go back and do a more detailed analysis to answer that question with any precision. A superficial observation is that the high school folks their concerns didn't tend to be as specific to the content as it was to the general system. They tended to be concerned about the challenge of things. They tended to be concerned about whether they had the lab materials to do these things. This is a broad generalization, not true for everyone, but it tended to be more, how is this going to affect me? Am I going to be able to do this? Are my students going to be able to do this? Rather than reword this statement in this way or change this standard in this way.
Can I just also add that Dr. Conley mentioned, I think, that there were you could upload documents, and I know that in the last days of the system, we received documents that would have counted as like one public comment, but it came from Houston ISD. that came from Northeast ISD. So a lot of the larger districts in the waning days of the process turned in one form for the district. So I don't think those uploads have really been analyzed.
They're not a consolidated response.
Yeah.
Yes. Did we not get a response from the Texas Association of School Administrators?
Yes, we did.
Yes. So that's an association that's obviously very important, and they did send a collective response.
Thank you.
Lizette, do you have any more comments you'd like to make? Members? More questions or comments?
Madam Chairman, I've got a question, and it probably will sound like a statement, but I'm very interested in trying to understand what's going on here in simple terms that I can understand. Raymond has been talking for 2 or 3 years about increasing the rigor of study for high school graduates. And I agree with that 1,000%. Maybe the discussion is going on and I just don't know about it, but where is the rigor and the performance level of the high school teachers that are turning these students out that don't match our requirements? What's happening with them? And also, I thought there was a little ray of light shining through when we came forth with some pay for performance. And yet, I read in my local area that people are rejecting it. They don't want it. There's a disconnect in here somewhere. And I don't know whether it's we don't want to be out on front with the whole thing and talk about it in public or not. But I think it requires some discussion.
I think our commissioner's the perfect person.
Well, I understand that. That's the reason I posed the question, because I've got a disconnect here.
I'm going to ask Lizette to perhaps pitch in on this. Commissioner Scott has said any number of times since we began this process that rigorous college readiness standards would require a significant upgrading and a significant amount of attention paid to professional development, and we've been saying in higher education that it would require that actually meeting these college readiness standards for a large number of students would require a significant shift in the way we train teachers to go into the classroom. We have already begun those conversations with deans of schools of education. I know that Commissioner Scott has had some internal conversations with his colleagues about what these college readiness standards would mean in terms of professional development for teachers that are already in place. We fully recognize exactly what you just said, that we not only have to expect more of students, we have to expect more of teachers.
We got 4 years to do it.
Which is not much time. We have some big challenges in front
That
of
was
us.
in your action, though, plan, right, Abby? I mean, you talked to that.
Absolutely. And we are planning on some that we're hoping will start in the next 5 or 6 months that you're going to see them on.
I have a kind of a quick question for Lizette. How great is the outreach to school board members throughout the state, making sure that they are given the opportunity to understand what's going on, to feel a part of what's going on, feel part of this, given the timeline and given how it's going to end up with the State Board of Education implementing it. I mean, I'm concerned that they're maybe out of the loop, and yet they're the policymakers for the school districts. So how's that work?
Right. Well, I mean, I think part of this process as it started, you know, I mean, the bill passed last May, right? May before this session. And so when the vertical team process was put into place, I mean, it was kind of a very, per the legislation, was a somewhat of a closed process. So that's been kind of moving along, and that was kind of part of when the governor created the Commission for College Ready Texas to try to help increase the debate, talk a little bit more about what makes a college-ready Texas. And so that process just ended in mid-November, and so we are actually starting to look internally about how we can talk more about what this board passes in January, what the commissioner is going to do next, how we work with the state board to help inform them about what was passed, and to work with our constituents and our stakeholders to get to that level. I mean, I think the interesting piece, obviously, is the fact that, right now we're in the middle of rewriting the TEKS for English Reading Language Arts. And the way that timeline is in place, I mean, you will have college readiness standards at the end of January, but we've already had a 2-year process in place to get something done by April on English Reading Language Arts. Then the next timelines, you have science that just got, the writing teams have been appointed, and they're moving along. I mean, the processes are kind of moving along with each other. So I think we have some time, particularly when it comes to the other content areas. English Language Arts is going to be real tight. But we're hoping that we've worked with the facilitator, and staff has worked with the facilitator to bring a lot of these discussions into the fold for the writing teams as they're writing the English Reading Language Arts TEKS.
Has there been a lot of input with TASB and the different regional service centers so that there's information going to the school districts as well along the process?
Yeah, and with House Bill 1, I mean, I think, with the vertical team process, I think, Evie or Susan Barnes could probably explain that a little bit more. As I said, the Governor's Commission, that was their purpose, and I know that those meetings were well attended by representatives of those associations, and they provided input as they provided input, but it was no formal process per se.
Lizette, can I ask you a question? I never have understood this, and I know that it's a thing that just goes on continually and there aren't any easy timelines, but how do textbooks fit into all this? Because don't you have to make your decisions? I mean, I'm just wondering how that's going to work.
Right. Yes, you're right. It is hard, and we actually had a discussion, and I don't know, Susan, you want to maybe help me a little bit, but one of the discussions we're trying to figure out and trying to have is, how do we align the college readiness standards, how they become part of the TEKS writings process, and then using the timelines that were set forth in House Bill 1, how we mesh those with our actual proclamation dates. And there are some issues there that we need to figure out, hopefully by 2009, because there are some drivers in House Bill 1 that maybe are a little bit, I guess, they're earlier than when the state board actually is going to adopt instructional materials. So
it sounds like y'all are on top of it.
Anything you can help, Susan, there.
Well, I'm Susan Barnes with the Texas Education Agency. Good morning, or afternoon, actually. Time flies when you're busy. Lizette is correct. The State Board of Education has in place a process where, prior to the adoption of new instructional materials, the board has put in place a process to review the texts and to update those texts, rewrite the texts, and she's correct. We're right in the middle of the English Language Arts rewrite. Once the board adopts those texts, they then become part of the proclamation for new instructional materials. That proclamation essentially is, for example, if we adopt a proclamation this spring in 2007, those instructional materials are delivered to the classroom 3 years later. Publishers need, this always upsets people, but publishers need approximately 2 years to create the material specific to the state curriculum standards, because the requirements for reviewing those materials are really just 3 in nature. By statute, they have to meet a manufacturer's standard to last for 8 years of rough usage by our children. They have to cover all of the instructional standards that the State Board has adopted, and they have to be error-free. So that's why those publishers have to specifically spend that time. And then the State Board has a pretty extensive process of reviewing those instructional materials. So once the college readiness standards are in place, and as the board goes through that cycle, right now they're finishing ELA, they're starting science, following that will be social studies. The college readiness standards, the board will have the opportunity to look at the standards that are in place. As the texts are being revised, that incorporation, the bill says incorporate, can be accomplished. And then your instructional materials that are adopted, and this state spends a significant amount of money on instructional materials, a very significant amount. But those materials will, by statute, be aligned with text and through the text to the college readiness standards.
Right, but in the meanwhile, obviously, there are textbooks being adopted, there's
Right.
curriculum being written, so it's kind of an overlap.
And
between
math has already
tech-
been.
It's
I mean, new
always
math
the
has already
problem.
been written.
That's correct.
And so the new math textbook that's coming in 3 years from now,
Actually, the math textbooks were delivered for secondary schools this fall, and I think we spent in the neighborhood of $400 million on those textbooks. The State Board adopted elementary mathematics books at the November meeting. That means those books will be available to the schools next fall. So that's how that works. English language arts textbooks, the proclamation was adopted in November. We will amend that proclamation once the English language arts standards are finalized, we hope, in April. And those books have a very short timeline. They would be available to the school districts, I believe this is correct, in 2010. I think that's correct. So that's where we are with that. That's why we hope to get those aligned. It's a tight schedule, but we're working to make them aligned.
They're aligned by, or, I mean, make you repeat, are they aligned by topic area and all grade levels within topic area, or by topic and grade level?
Well, the way the state curriculum standards are established for, let's just take mathematics. There are mathematics text essential knowledge and skills for grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, through grade 8. Once you get to grade 9, those are by specific courses, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, etc.
Well, it seems to me that if the goal is to work backward for college readiness standards and to deal with the next year's ninth graders, the class of 2012, that's where the curriculum alignment and synchronizing the curriculum alignment with the textbook approval should be, that's where the focus should be.
Yes, sir, and mathematics is their problem child here because the board readopted, realigned texts, I'll say 2 years ago. It must be because we're delivering textbooks this year. And the way House Bill 1 is established, it requires that the minimum curricular standards, professional development, and materials for English language arts aligned with the college readiness standards be available by 2009. And then it names mathematics to be the next year, 2010. And then it kind of groups, I guess, the science and social studies together because it says we are to complete by September 1 of 2011 this process of professional development, and then all that piece has to go to the State Board of Education for their approval in those 4 core areas. So we will first deal with English language arts. It's kind of in the pipeline, and we'll have to go back and pick up mathematics.
Has TEA, I'm sure you've given some thought, has there been any move towards changing the structure of the textbooks RFPs to try to take advantage of what I would have assumed have been much greater technology advances in publishing in this 3-year lead time?
The current status of the State Board rules on instructional materials allows and has allowed for a number of years complete online instruction. It's up to the publisher to decide whether to submit a print textbook or a print and online or a print and CD or only online. We do have one curricular area which is called technology applications. That is totally a non-print delivered set of instructional materials.
What percentage of instruction materials are delivered that way?
I don't really know, sir. We would have to do some research on that. There are a number of categories of instruction materials. The board adopts a certain set of submitted and reviewed materials. Once that is done and a district chooses to go with those materials, there is a massive set of other materials that we call free with order, that once a district chooses a publisher's product, that publisher may supply online tutoring, formative assessments, web resources. So it would be extremely difficult to get a sense of where all those pieces are. I don't know that I have a list of all the free with order materials, and many of them are electronic.
Well, I guess, unfortunately, it's a generalization, but I would hate to see the publisher to be the tail that wags the dog on curriculum alignment.
Sure.
So I think, Laurie, to rephrase the question you were asking, that if we're successful with the curriculum alignment, then the TEKS becomes an afterthought, a product of
And then the
successfully taught
textbooks, which
curriculum.
they've already paid money for, don't align with the college readiness standards. And then it takes to the next cycle to buy the new textbooks to align with the,
Which I
But I
don't know how
think I think in English language arts, you'll have that. We are working very carefully to be sure that those timelines are working. Does that make sense? Because the board will have to look at, in April, the English language arts standards. They have the draft standards. You will have the opportunity to adopt college readiness standards in January, so that alignment should be hopefully not an issue. It's a board decision, of course, from our perspective on what they choose to incorporate or not. And once the texts are adopted, the textbooks must be aligned with the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. That's simply the way it is. There is a possibility for what we call a non-conforming book, which only covers 50 to 99% of the text, but the publisher only gets paid by the state for the proportion of texts that are covered. So if the publisher only covers 60% of the text, we give them 60% of the money. In reality, districts do not choose materials off of the non-conforming list. They choose materials from the conforming list, period.
Given all those timelines, how can we prepare cut scores by 2012?
This is one of the things, when you were asking about the long-range planning, this is one of the things that we're going to be working both with TEA and with the study to see if it can, our goal is to do that 2012. But it could be that when we come up in January, you see that it's a phased-in, a phased-in timeline, so that we can conform to their list. But I was thinking about your question about, are you still going to be involved with TEA? We can't figure out a way we wouldn't be.
Right. No, I just wanted to make sure it was going to keep going. That was my...
Yes, and we are.
And one last question, is there any, creativity in these publishing contracts where a supplement could be sought or something like that?
I think probably in the mathematics area, because that one is the one that's out of a line. We'll have to be looking at something. It depends, in all honesty, it depends on what gap might exist, if that makes any sense. I think we don't have a solid target yet. The targets are still moving. The state board has adopted the text, but the college readiness standards are not yet, in my opinion, totally solidified. Right. And so at that point, you do have to go back and look at that, and then we would have to explore with the board what they would want to adjust in the text. And at that point, there might be a need for some additional materials.
Sounds like y'all are on top of it. Any more questions? Okay, thank you so much. While they're making their way back to their seats, I just wanted to say that we all our state owes a huge debt of gratitude to all the teachers who worked so productively and so professionally on these vertical teams and who will continue working. And we also are very grateful to those who collaborated with them, especially the Texas Education Agency and the College Ready Texas Commission and others too. And also we want to give a big hearty thanks to our own people who worked tremendously hard for a long time envisioning this and then making it happen. The commissioner, first and foremost, and Evie, Lynette Hickman, and David Gardner. And I'm sure there are others too that I don't know about. Thank you all so much. Great accomplishment.
Virtually every safety agency has been working on this issue.
Commissioner, you think we covered most of the comments?
Yes, the only thing I would underscore is clearly this won't work unless we align things. The higher education and public education have worked independently for so long that you've got all these misalignments, and we have to fix that. The other point I wanted to make is I feel very confident that the comments that we've received on our website do represent a cross-section of public school teachers as well as college and university faculty, administrators on both sides, and I think that we have a process in place that Professor Conley outlined that will enable us to really blend, to synthesize not only the drafts, but of both the Commission for College Ready Texas and the vertical teams, but also to synthesize the comments. We are going to take those comments very seriously and produce a document that we think is in the best interest of Texas students. And actually, most of the work is still ahead of us in the next month.
Well, we know that we can tell that there's been strong interest in the standards from all the comments we've received. Is there anyone in the audience who feels we've missed any comment and would like to comment at this time? Okay, we will move along then. As the Commissioner indicated, what happens next is that there will probably be some reworking of the draft based on the public comments received and the discussion today. And then we will meet again on January the 15th. We'll receive the draft, the final draft, I hope, on the 10th, on January the 10th. Members will receive it, and then we'll meet on the 15th. So let that serve as an extra reminder to you that we do have that special called meeting on January the 15th. And information about that meeting is posted on our website. All right, our next item is 2B, a discussion of doctoral program policy. This topic is revisited every several years by the board because of its importance and the changing demands facing doctoral education. Assistant Commissioner Dr. Joe Stafford will give us some background on this and talk about some recent shifts in the review process for doctoral programs. Joe?
Okay, and I know you're eager to get on with all of the agenda after this much time on college readiness standards. We do have several other items. The Graduate Education Advisory Committee has been advising the staff now for something over 2 years. And in that process, a lot of their energy has been focused on doctoral programs, and that's where I would like to make just a few comments, and we'll do a lot more of that in April. But the Graduate Education Advisory Committee, or the GEAC as we tend to refer to them, has 4 different areas where they're prepared to proceed, and we at the staff are prepared to proceed if we hear no objections. The first is that they've identified 18 characteristics of doctoral programs where they think it's appropriate for us to provide public information, accountability information, at the program level. And I have to emphasize that our accountability system at the present time deals with accountability at the institutional level. This would be a significant change to provide public information in a standardized format, quantitative measures for each doctoral program. And I could go over those, but they're not too surprising. Graduation rates, average time to degree, average financial aid, financial support for full-time students, et cetera. I think fairly predictable measures. And so I want you to know that that's one that we are planning to proceed with unless we hear significant objections. The second area that the GIAC is recommending is that periodic peer review of all doctoral programs take place, and we'll obviously have to work out the mechanics of that, but this would be a requirement then that every doctoral program at every institution be reviewed every few years by people in that profession from outside that institution. That becomes a quality check that in some cases occurs because of specialized accreditation, but not in all cases. So this would in effect extend that specialized accreditation type of review model to all programs, and the results of that then being made available to the agency. A third recommendation that they have is that we raise the threshold on low-producing programs, and I'll go into a little more background on that in a moment. But the current minimum is, I believe it's 3 programs in 3 years. Is that correct, Roger? Help me remember that. It's a very low standard, frankly. It's way too low, and just where we would raise that to remains to be seen, but I'll tell you why I think it ought to be closer to 5 or 6 every year. And then their fourth recommendation is that we modify our current position on preliminary authority. Preliminary authority or planning authority in effect now says to an institution, if the board's giving you preliminary authority, it's okay to go ahead and invest resources in a new program and in getting ready to deliver it, and it presumes then that we've signed off on the question of need. The problem with that, of course, well, there are 2 problems. One is that what appears to be a needed program may change if you wait too long. The circumstances change. And the other is we probably haven't been quite as rigorous in establishing that need criteria going in. So those are 4 recommendations. If I may now comment about research doctorates in particular and kind of tie these things together. So for the moment, consider it focused on the research doctorate or the PhD, not on those professional practice doctorates like the Doctor of Nursing Practice that we've dealt with recently, or the Doctor of Physical Therapy, or for that matter even the EDD. The first criteria for an effective research doctorate, and I would consider it a threshold condition, is the ability of the faculty to mentor junior scholars. PhD is really an apprenticeship in scholarship, and you can't be an apprentice to somebody who isn't a master. So the first requirement is that mastery of scholarship. Strong senior scholars, researchers in that discipline. That's where the periodic review, I think, comes in most significantly. It's that periodic review of the strength of the scholarship that determines, or that assesses, if you will, the overall potential quality of the program. Now, having strong scholarship doesn't by itself guarantee that you've got a strong doctoral program, but it is a precondition. Without strong scholarship, without the masters there to apprentice to, the rest of it can't follow. So the nature of this periodic review that we are probably going towards will place a real emphasis on the strength of the scholarship. Kind of related to that is the question of degree productivity. If you've only got a few strong scholars, then you can only have at most a few graduates if you are holding up the standards. So in some sense, the low productivity is an indicator of low scholarship potential. And I say indicator, and I want to really emphasize that. It isn't a measure of it, it's a signal. It's a take a look at it kind of indicator. The economics of running a doctoral program under our formula basically funds on an average cost per credit hour per student. Kind of dictates that you have a critical size student body coming in and graduating each year. It depends a little bit on how the formula works and how much external funding there is, and so each program is unique. Yet I've found in the past that a pretty good starting point is somewhere close to 10 graduates a year, which means 10 or so strong and active practicing scholars. If you don't have somewhere in that range, it probably means that the undergraduate program is going to be subsidizing the graduate program. So that's the other piece of taking a look at low productivity. Now, as I say, it's still very much a specific degree program, and that rule of thumb is just enough to sort of get one started in a conversation. Then you get the pencil out and really do the calculations on the formulas, on the costs, and so forth. But in effect, you have to have enough students to generate some surplus revenue in the courses or the seminars in order to have the revenue to fund the one-on-one mentorship in the research, unless the research is very well funded externally. Now, if the research is well funded externally, then that number can drop down a good bit. And so those become part of the criteria for our trying to look at doctoral programs and look at what the some of what the GIAC has said. With regard to whether we should continue to honor the commitments that were implied in the preliminary authority, planning authority, let me try to phrase it this way. The quality of the research is a precondition. Without strong scholarship, the program's not feasible. But just being feasible that you can have a strong program doesn't necessarily mean that the state of Texas should invest in it. There are a lot of things that the state of Texas could invest in, and not all of them should be. So while it doesn't make sense to invest in a program that's not strong, what is the need? Does Texas need the graduates? Where will they go? What will they do? How will they serve Texas if we produce them? And you could say the same thing, does the U.S. need them? And come back to that in a moment. Then, if the answer to that is yes, is a new program the way to produce them? And there the question is there some other way to meet that need? are there existing programs with capacity that could serve additional students and therefore produce more graduates? And if so, could investing in a little bit more, some way, in those existing programs be more cost-effective than starting a new program? And then kind of the third question is, if you create the new program, will it in fact produce graduates? Will the students enroll? Will they be the quality of strength of students that will produce the kind of graduates that we have said we need? I could go into more example of that, but I think you get the general thrust of it. So, that's kind of where we are at the moment. That's what we're moving ahead on. We won't have a chance to go into this in more depth until the March 6th meeting in preparation for the April board meeting. And at the April board meeting, I think this will be a major issue for us to discuss. But I really wanted, as much as anything, to say, if you have other guidance for us, if you think that the direction that I'm heading with any of this sounds wrong, we'd appreciate the feedback. Otherwise, at the staff level, we'll be continuing pretty much down this pathway.
Thank you, Joe. What is the composition of the GIAC?
Roger works with those so closely, and all I can tell you, as the past chair of that, when I was on the other side of the fence, it was broad representation of the whole state. You probably have the membership with you.
I don't have the specific names, but we have 24 members. One is a student, a doctoral student, and 2 members are from independent universities, and the others are health-related institutions and public universities in Texas.
They're graduate deans, too, virtually.
Mostly graduate deans.
Or associate deans.
Right. And some faculty, but mostly graduate deans.
Henry, you have questions, comments? Under the peer review concept, some of the PhDs are actually employed outside of the university setting. Will there be any outreach to employers about ranking or giving input to the quality of the product coming out?
That's a good suggestion. I can't say that I'd really even gotten far enough to think about how we would compose the peer teams, but we certainly have done that in other efforts.
I think employers would be good, but also past graduates.
Yes. In general, I think the overriding criteria is that we get clear, independent judgment, that they be people who are distinguished in their field, but have no affiliations or connections with the institutions that are being reviewed.
Is it Texas only, or are you looking for resources outside?
Generally, when we look for peers, we look for peers outside the state of Texas. Where we have done some in-state reviewers, they have been the industry people, the people who, while they reside in Texas, don't have an affiliation with the institutions that are being reviewed.
Thank you, Joe. Commissioner, anything?
No, I would just underscore what Joe said. We need to initiate a process for review of graduate programs, particularly doctoral programs, on a regular basis. We've got to ensure quality. We've got to ensure that there's a market for the students that are produced in these programs, and we've got to make certain that they're cost efficient, given our very limited state resources.
Thank you. Our next item is 2C, a discussion and consideration of adopting recommendations by the committee to the board for approval of requests for new degree programs and a new college. Joe will explain these requests, and if there are no objections, we'll treat these 2 related requests as a single item for committee action. The first request is from Texas A&M University's Health Science Center for creation of a College of Nursing. The related request, which is 2C2, also from Texas A&M University's Health Science Center, is for a Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree with a major in nursing. Joe, you going to take us through those, please?
Sure. This is a pretty straightforward one. As you know, the legislature has, even through legislation, identified the need for more nursing graduates. We have a couple of major programs in the agency to boost the number of nursing graduates. It's almost inconceivable, actually, that we have a health science center without a college of nursing at the moment. This would fix that. By starting a baccalaureate level program in two different parts, a regular nursing program and then a baccalaureate completion program for ADN nurses, and then would establish a College of Nursing as the organizational entity for that program, with full expectation that that College of Nursing, after it gets its baccalaureate programs up and going, would add the master's level programs.
You neglected to mention that the board designated nursing within Closing the Gaps as one of the critical fields to increase graduates as well.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? You've heard the staff recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved?
Made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 2C3 is from Texas State University San Marcos for a Doctor of Philosophy, PhD degree in mathematics education in cooperation with Sam Houston State University. Joe, are you going to begin with that?
I will. And we do have representatives from the institutions here to speak, and I'm sure you'll want to call on them after I try to kind of lay out the issue.
Why don't you all come on up to the table and then I'll call on you.
I'll come up.
All right.
See if I can get the rest.
You're the brave one.
Okay. You'll recall that this is an item that we left pending at the last quarterly meeting of the board. My comments earlier, I think, are directly applicable here, that I at least regard the quality of the scholarship as a precondition, and then the question of the need being clearly demonstrated. This is one where the need issue, I'm sure the institution felt, was addressed sometime before I came to the agency. It's been around for a while. Nonetheless, as we have re-examined that question of need, we find that it's not nearly so evident. And again, there's no question about the need for more success in mathematics and in the mathematics-related fields. And the board's adopted STEM goals. That's not the question. The question is the need for an additional program at the PhD level in mathematics education. So I want to be very clear about what it is we're talking about as the need. And the burden of proof really is on those who propose to make the investment. And I know that Roger Alford has identified one particular journal article that shows that as a nation there are more vacancies than there are annual graduates in math ed at the PhD level. That would be one strong measure of need. On the other hand, Texas hasn't for 20 years offered a baccalaureate degree in math education. As you probably know, since the passage of Senate Bill 994 some 20 years ago, our secondary teachers get degrees in the substantive field and take typically 12 hours of practice teaching and 6 hours of pedagogy courses, and that's it for education. So there's little opportunity to take coursework at the baccalaureate level in math education. Most of the math education courses are delivered at the master's level for practicing teachers. There are, I believe it is a half dozen EDD or PhD programs in math education in the state. Some of them do suggest that they have additional capacity, could produce more graduates if they had the students and the financial support. So we do not find a strong evidence in support of the need question. It does not appear that this would be a wise investment for the state of Texas. Although I acknowledge that I think we gave signals that earlier that we thought it would be. And I know that the institution has made some investments based on those signals. The bigger concern that I have personally from looking at websites at other doctoral programs in math education and looking at the publication records of the faculty is that I'm not convinced that we have the strength of leadership for a significant math education program here. There are 6 faculty members at San Marcos. I believe it is 5 at the partner Sam Houston. The majority of those do not have long, strong publication records. In many cases, we're talking about assistant professors who are just starting their careers, showing a lot of promise, but don't have that strength and that mastery at this point. The bottom line on all of that is that at staff level, we can't recommend to you that this program be approved, and I'm confident that the institution would like to persuade you otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Just before we ask for your comments, what is the timeline? How long has this request been in the system here?
Do you all know?
A little over 2 years. 2 years. Thank you. I'd like to first just note a couple of things about the university, in case you do not know it. Texas State has not been bringing a large number of doctoral programs to the coordinating board at all. As a result of our strategic planning, and it is a process that Dr. Paredes has praised on several occasions, we selected only a very, very small number of doctoral programs to bring forward out of the 80-something master's programs that we have at the university. And we've done so where we thought there was an identified need and where we had expertise and perhaps unique expertise in order to address that need. Secondly, I would emphasize, as an institution, we're not one that has ignored our undergraduate student population, as we have brought forward a very limited number of doctoral proposals. Out of our 28,000 plus students, we have 24,000 undergraduates. And they're still first and foremost in our minds, even as we suggest doctoral programs. For example, we stand 5th in the state in terms of graduating our undergraduate students. We stand 5th behind UT Austin, Texas A&M College Station, Texas Tech, and University of Texas at Dallas. We're proud of that fact. We'd like to be higher than 5th, but 5th out of the 30-something institutions is not bad, particularly when your level of support from the state is 32nd per FTE student out of 35 institutions. So we do a lot with what we've been given. Unlike some universities across the land who continue to put forward expensive, as Joe has noted, doctoral programs, who at the same time have rather dismal rates of graduation at the undergraduate level, I think one could wonder why they are doing that when their success with the heart of their student population does not look so good. Also, unlike many of the doctoral programs that have been in existence for years, the few we have, we try to do well in them. And we have delivered what we have promised to deliver. When we said we'd have graduates, we will have graduates. We have had graduates, and we will have them here. Speaking now to this particular proposal, I believe, unlike Dr. Stafford, that the PhD in math ed is very much needed. There's really only one other one in the state where there is a major, and that's at UT Austin. There's a concentration at A&M. But in both of those programs, there are very low rates of graduation, several students per year on average. In contrast, there are 300-something vacancies in math ed for PhD trained or doctorally trained math educators in the nation per year. Approximately 95 degrees are given each year across the nation, and only 45 of those go back into the universities. The other 45 have already they're coming from someplace, finishing a doctorate and going back. They're not really on the market. I think that the math ed doctorate is also, can be, very useful in speaking to STEM-related areas of need in the state. Our math department, I believe, is a little bit better than Joe has noted. It has received millions in terms of grants. It has received hundreds of thousands from foundations for its work in educating students in math and for math ed. We followed all the processes, all the rules that we have known have existed by the coordinating board. Joe is talking about new changes that GIAC might produce, but these are new. These aren't in existence now, and I don't believe they should be applied to us now. I think first you should establish policy and then apply policy to proposals, not the reverse of that. So GIAC is just getting started with some of these things. We're nowhere near yet having suggested policy. We were given preliminary planning authority for the program from the coordinating board staff. At the time we got it, before that, as I understand it, preliminary authority meant sort of the opportunity to go out and hunt for, if you will, hunt for a doctorate. But we were told at that time that that had changed, and that if you had received preliminary authority, that most had assumed that there was indeed a need, and that the basic infrastructure was in place within your university to respond to that need. So on that assumption, and the university, we have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in hiring faculty. Some of them tenure-line faculty. These are continuing dollars on the basis of that assumption. As far as evaluating the capacity of a faculty to mentor new doctorates, I think you have to depend upon your external reviewers. That's the process. We had a set of external reviewers. The coordinating board approved and selected a set of external reviewers. So there were two sets who came and reviewed the program. These are the experts. While they made suggestions for improvement, they all said that the program could go forward. We have already acted on their suggested improvements. I might just remind you the program was recommended for approval by this staff not more than 60 days ago, and it approved on the agenda as recommended for approval. It was later postponed. We have responded to a number of questions that have come forth about the proposal that weren't directly related to the format and organization that one would fill out in reference to prepare the draft for the proposal. These questions were never given to the external reviewers, and in some cases they've never been written down. We feel like we've answered every question put to us. And when we answer another question, another criterion is adopted and set before us that we have to meet. We feel a little hurt. We feel like it's sort of a shell game in a way, that guess where the next question is going to come from. We feel disappointed, but more than that, we feel a bit misinformed, misled, and at the end of the day, a little misused. Thank you.
Dr. Craigcraft, do you have anything to add?
He's pretty much covered that, and we have talked about graduate issues for a long time. At this board, the coordinating board, Raymond and I have had discussions, obviously David, on that. No one understands the need for accountability any more than we do. No one understands the need of dedicated resources, of limited resources, than I think that we do. No one is more affordable in this state probably than we are, and certainly the numbers bear that out. So when we confront an issue and we take a challenge on that, our goal is to be successful. More importantly, our goal is to be a good investment for the state and for the state's dollars. When we've had doctoral reviews in the past, where regardless of where they are in the system on that, we take very seriously that these programs should be reviewed on terms of productivity, success, and meeting needs. I'm not for sure, but listening to the P16, if I recall accurately, one of the most important single courses in predicting success in higher education is Algebra 2. And this is something in math education we address the need not only for public schools and not only community college, but other individuals who want to invest in math education. You know, when in terms of capacity, and Joe and I have talked about this before as well, there's a difference in having a capacity to expand and a willingness to expand that capacity and a willingness to invest the resources. Now, you look at over a 5-year period, where have these other doctoral programs in math education been in terms of number of students admitted, the commitment of resources, and then the success and applying these committed resources to producing graduates? You have the commitment from us to do that. It's very important to us. Math education is not a secondary thought, it's a primary concern. And we feel like that we have to do that in closing the gaps and reaching those as well as meeting the needs of this state. 17,000 new faculty members are predicted by 2015. A good portion of them are going to be related to this area. We think we're more than up for the task.
Thank you both so much. If y'all would just stay there, because I know there are going to be questions. Commissioner?
Well, I want to begin by saying I don't disagree with anything either of you said, Ken or Perry. I think that you're absolutely right that I have said publicly that Texas State San Marcos is a model in terms of strategic planning and being very careful about the programs it brings to the coordinating board. I've been on the campus a number of times and admire the work that you're doing. Indeed, I've been prodding you for some time to bring forward a particular PhD proposal. And I don't think there's any question that we led you to believe that this program would be approved. I think the evidence is incontrovertible in that regard. That was a mistake, and I can assure you we will not be doing that with any other institution in the future. I should say that the changing the standards or being more diligent, I should say, about enforcing standards here at among the staff is largely the result of my intervention. I have been saying for some time, I've talked to Ken about this, and I have felt uncomfortable with the quality of doctoral education across the state in a lot of regards. I don't think we've done a very good job of monitoring the quality. I said that earlier. And I told the staff that I wanted them to enforce our standards rigorously. And I think that Texas State San Marcos got caught in the middle of that. However, having accepted responsibility for the mistakes that we've made, here are some questions that are unanswered for me. I was a dean of a graduate division at a major research university, so I think I know a good deal about graduate education. It is, there seems to me to be little doubt that there's a need for more math educators at the graduate level in this country. But what you have not demonstrated in the documentation that I've read is whether it's a capacity issue or it's a pipeline issue. I happen to think it's a pipeline issue. From the conversations that I've had with people in the field of math education, they tell me they have capacity at their institutions. They can't get enough students. So I think one of the issues that has to be addressed more thoroughly than you have in this document is precisely that question. The second question that I have is that most of the things that you talk about doing in this proposal, as far as I can tell, can be done by training at the master's level. The work that you want to do, working with elementary, middle, high schools, working with community colleges, increasing the number of faculty that can teach math effectively in the community colleges. All those are areas of work that we need to improve in dramatically. But once again, there's a claim in the documentation that I saw that there will be that some of the PhDs that can be produced by this program would be hired by community colleges. Where's the evidence for that? A doctoral degree is not a requirement for teaching in a community college. Most community colleges are not expanding very much in terms of permanent faculty. They're hiring more and more temporary faculty. That question has to be addressed. There are some other issues in here that I think that require further explanation. And for me, Perry, this isn't a matter of establishing new criteria. It's a matter of answering legitimate questions that we need to ask fully whenever any proposal for a doctoral program comes before us.
And have those questions been asked?
Yes, they have been asked.
We ask about the pipeline vis-a-vis capacity issue.
Well, no, but we have talked about it. I know that we talked about that when we had discussions of it.
But in the process, have those questions been formally asked and they given an opportunity to respond before you made a judgment?
Yes, the question is addressed.
Part of the data, I think, that probably is needed in helping us to address the questions adequately are data that are contained by the coordinating board and the state. For instance, when you're talking about capacity, I have no clue how many doctoral degrees have been awarded in math education this year. I don't know the 5-year enrollment rate, nor the completion rate of the doctoral programs at A&M or the University of Texas. There's a difference between offering a degree and emphasizing a degree. There's an emphasis in importance of degree that are offered by institutions and whether or not they have the priority of the administration in completing that. And these are the types of data that I think are critically important. And I certainly applaud the work that the GIAC is going to be doing because accountability is what it's all about. And certainly quality is what it's all about. Emphasis is what it's all about. And this is the thing that we feel very strongly about in this state and being able to deliver, again, what we say we're going to deliver. So, again, I may have a capacity to double, but where's the indication that I've invested in doubling the capacity? And where's the investment and where are the results and the number of people I have graduated? That's another thing that we've talked about frequently about the need. You know, there's some programs that are probably going to need to be reviewed in terms of whether or not they should continue offering degrees. You don't produce graduates and you don't produce them in a timely manner, guess what? That's the same thing as not having a graduate program. But in many cases, the existence of this program could have a negative impact on whether or not we could offer a quality program. Now, I stand by, if you look at the track record of the doctoral programs in the Texas State University system, those that are offering the largest number of degrees, obviously Texas State and Sam Houston State University. They're very specialized degrees. They're areas that we feel that they're high demand and meet the needs in this particular state, and we think we're successful in doing so. We don't offer a broad range. We offer a few that are concentrated, and it's, again, it's an investment in state dollars for us to be successful. You entrust us, empower us, And certainly, we take that trust and that empowerment very seriously in what we're able to do, how we invest the resources, and then again, producing graduates.
You ask about the capacity issue. I cannot speak to the capacity of the other institutions and whether they have capacity or do not have capacity. I think the best thing you can see is what they have done. But we have, as you know, we got provisional, there's perhaps another mistake, but provisional authority to admit students. We already have 8 in this program without it being advertised at all. I think that we have every confidence that we will be able to obtain quality, competent students who will complete this program. I need to introduce someone you already know, Dr. Celine Vasquez, who has assisted professor of math and who has also assisted with the readiness standards in math. And she may be able to speak to this issue of whether you could offer it at a master's level as opposed to a PhD level. I haven't been a dean of the graduate school, but I have been a dean for a long period of time of a liberal arts college. And in that capacity, I developed, it was difficult for me to do it, but a bit of hesitancy in guessing what every discipline needed without going to the fellow experts in the discipline. And we had experts in this discipline, 2 sets of them, who came and reviewed these questions and reviewed this program and did not recommend that it not go forward.
Hi, good afternoon. Selena Vasquez Modelis. I'm in the math department at Texas State University. I'm an associate professor and working on the full professor diligently. And I welcome the opportunity to speak to you all regarding this issue. It is a very serious matter for us, and like Dr. Moore said, not only do we have 8 students already there, we have some students that are here with us today to show the importance of this issue because it affects their lives as well as other lives in the state of Texas and across the nation and internationally as well. Because I myself, in addition to some of my colleagues, have had these conversations with these people, and so we're talking about people's lives that the decisions here will affect. In any event, I wanted to address some of the things that Dr. Paredes had mentioned. You alluded to another doctoral program, and in fact, I happened to be sitting next to you at a meeting a couple of years ago, sponsored by the College of Education at our institution regarding developmental education, and I have a feeling that's the one that you're talking about. And just to address Dr. Stafford's issues and try to grab this as much as I can. As a mathematician, I may not be as eloquent with my words, but I will try to speak linearly as much as possible. That's the only way to do it. I want to say that, Elaine, I'm sorry.
No.
You're picking on me again.
All I said was don't go nonlinear.
Okay. And I have to preface what I'm about to say with a comment about my mother. She never said, she always was upset with me because I grew up in the Valley. I was born and raised in Brownsville, and she always wanted to brag about me, and I never let her. And so I'm going to, in the spirit of my mom's wishes, I'm going to go ahead and brag about myself. I want to say that in the nation, I am nationally recognized as an expert in developmental mathematics. Without that piece in this doctoral program coming up that you'd like to see, the developmental education, that could not happen. I have received FIPSE funding, which is the Fund for Improvement of Post-Secondary Education. That's a national award. It's very competitive. In fact, Yuri Treisman, whom I'm sure you know, came to me last year and said he couldn't believe that I got one and he didn't. And the year that I received FIPSE funding twice. The year that I received FIPSE funding the first time, I was only in my second year at Texas State. I was a junior faculty, just a baby. And not only were my ideas important and recognized, the U.S. Department of Education came to me and asked me if I would take an extra $10,000 to add to the research base regarding developmental mathematics. And I said, okay, I would do that. And so I have to echo what Dr. Moore said, that I feel very hurt and offended when I feel like we're being judged in terms of our publications. And I know that Dr. Paredes has gone on record saying, and I read your article, your interview from the college, the CRLA and the Journal of Developmental Education, where they interviewed you a couple of months ago, and saying that there is a void in the research base regarding developmental education. And I'd like to feel that Texas State, what I'm telling you is that Texas State is at the forefront of adding to that research base, primarily in developmental mathematics, which is housed in the math department, which is a unique aspect of what we can attribute in terms of mathematics education. And so that was a long about way of saying some of the things, and we can go on and on and on about the highlights. I'm not the only one. A lot of my colleagues are back here, the chair of the math department, the dean of the College of Science, the dean of the College of the Graduate College, and of course, like I mentioned, the students themselves. Anything that you want to know, that you just need to ask, and we'll get it. And I'm so glad that Elaine mentioned about asking us, because we work through anything and everything to do what you want us to do, to convince you that we can do it. And we thought that we had been given that opportunity and that chance a few years ago. And then 2 days ago, well, no, not going to happen again. And we just don't know what to do anymore, to tell you that. I just want you to know, from our perspective, we're at the front lines, we will do that. The governor himself, I know Elaine, and I say that her name firsthand. We're on the Commission for the College Ready Texas. I was the chair of the vertical team for the math. I'm at Texas State. And so somebody entrusted me to do something right. And my colleagues are just as good, if not even better. So I want you to know from the faculty perspective that we will do it, and we'll do it better than anybody else.
Thank you. Members, questions or comments? Elaine?
Well, first of all, I needed a little asterisk. You all know that STEM is one of my passions. And so, while Algebra 2 is the best indicator about college success, it's been proven time and time again, I don't remember back in the Stone Age when I was in high school that I had master degree level teachers teaching trig and Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. And our gap is so wide in this arena, I don't see how we can be overkill on this. While I totally with us as a board that we cannot use state resources unwisely to place bets in the right vein, I think is our responsibility. And to invest in areas that need so much more work is our responsibility. Now, given all the emotions aside and some of the what was our responsibility, what was not, if you just look at the crux of the issue, being able to research better ways of teaching mathematics when we're on a trajectory of 20 and 15 to increase college graduates, I don't see how this is an unworthy investment. Now, perhaps the balance of the academicians here that you guys know, I've never been a dean of anything.
Your house.
My house, I'm a dean. Tell my husband. And actually tell my daughters that.
Okay, I was going to say,
is there any way that we can work together to put in place some metrics by which there are certain let's move forward, but put certain milestones in place, whether they're called bookmarks or benchmarks, in order to measure progress in this all-important area? That in our country, we're moving dollars away from basic research, and in so many areas, that's hurting us technologically. I'm sure in this area as well. We need to create better opportunities for looking at ways of research.
Can I just add to what she said real quickly before you respond? I don't want to take away from what you said, though. But I agree with Elaine. I'm wondering if there is a way, we've gone down this path this far. You obviously had enough confidence this far. What's to keep us from taking that next step and moving ahead?
Putting things in face. So we can feel good about being responsible. They can feel good about where they need to go and grow and shore up, if you will, if that's the right word. But at least we're making progress.
It's a difficult question. I guess where I am is I'm feeling pretty guilty that we've, and I say we, and it's a fairly collective kind of we, including some people who are no longer with the agency, have misled the institution for some time. And I am not comfortable being a part of continuing to do that. What I'm seeing in the documentation to date, including the responses to the questions that we got last week, is still a lack of evidence that there's a need there, that we can justify the kind of long-term expenditures that this would imply. And this is not like buying a piece of equipment that you can put on the truck and sell on the used equipment market. It's a little more analogous to buying a huge building that you know you can never sell and you're going to have to maintain for a long time. It's a very long-term commitment. It's a major commitment. And to make that commitment without clear evidence of need is the part that is most worrisome. Now, I also commented about the absence of a strong research program, and yes, I'd love to see a whole lot more research done, especially on developmental mathematics. Authorizing a doctoral program doesn't produce that. The existence of the research program is sort of the precondition for a doctoral program. It's not the other way around. So, Dr. Vasquez's resume is by far the strongest in the research publication record here, and if we had several people doing the same kind of thing, and maybe I've missed something, maybe I'm not reading the resumes correctly, but I'm not seeing the strength.
They're 2 years old. From the VITAs are 2 years old, and not all of us have updated our VITAs on the web as well.
Joe, we had 6 experts, national experts. You helped select them. They came. They talked to our faculty. They read the VITAs. They read the proposals, and they came back and said it could go forward. I assume you read it. There was a you recommended approving it, not 60 days ago.
I need to make a comment here, Ms. Phillips, with indulgence. Joe, how many graduates did we have last year in math that had PhDs in Texas?
I don't have the data with me.
I think that's an important point. And let me go ahead, since you feel a little bit guilty, I'm going to add to that a little bit more.
Okay.
And that's the full intent, and Raymond, I'll hand off a little bit there, too. There's not any more important issue in this state than P16 efforts. I mean, what's going to happen for us in this future generation depends on how successful we are in closing huge gaps and in making sure that we speak consistently and letting you know when we say college readiness, regardless of where we are, we know what we're talking about. I think that is such an admirable goal, I can't even begin. The training of teachers, Raymond, we've talked about the importance of that. Now, I want to ask you right now, the largest educator preparation program in this state is Texas State. Sam Houston State University, which is also a partner in this effort, is either 5 or 6. I don't know. I haven't seen those figures in a while. we're pretty darn proud of what we're able to do. And the indicators right now in terms of the success and preparation of our teachers are based on the exit exams. All we have to do is look at the results to know that we're certainly meeting those needs. Is it a finished product? Absolutely not. But certainly mathematics is one of the most important areas that we can address. And it not only comes through the preparation of good PhD leaders in the areas, whether it be the public schools, community colleges, or universities, but also those who are working with the professional development of teachers. We're pretty darn good at this, and we're going to be good at this. And it's something that we feel very well versed in. And actually, we don't feel like we take a back seat to anyone in terms of our emphasis and our ability to deliver this content in a meaningful way. This is an important degree to Texas, and it's certainly something that I think we can do.
Since you bring up the graduate issue, Ken, Commissioner mentioned the supply issue earlier, and we just sort of skipped by that. And the consultant's report has been brought up many times. The consultant specifically raised a concern about the pipeline and the supply of students as that's a national issue. Now, I know you have students here and you have students in the program, but that is and has been recognized as a real issue for such programs. I think one could suggest that that has something to do with the production of other programs, and it doesn't.
No, I do not believe that. I think part of the...
Did the reviewers bring that up as an issue? Do you recall?
I don't believe... They didn't bring it up certainly as an issue that is going to in any way kill the program. They all recommended, David, that it be go forward, as I remember.
They did say that they were concerned about the supply of students, correct? I just want to acknowledge that that was...
But you know what? I thought that...
Support are probably not enough.
And that's one of the reasons, I'm certain, that's one of the reasons, too, that we have two universities working on this as well. We're drawing students not only from out of state, but in state from two very large, I think, sources in terms of two of the largest educator preparation programs in the state.
Can I say something? I'm an old rhetoric and composition teacher, and I am sorry.
You're hearing a lot of rhetoric?
I'm sorry, my colleagues, but your argument is not proved very well, and theirs is. I'm chairman of this committee. I'm really interested in the quality of graduate programs. I want to work hard on it. But I'm just not persuaded by your arguments, and I'm more persuaded by their arguments. And we're going to set in place this fabulous program where we're going to review things every 3 years. I don't see why we can't review it in 3 years. I just don't see it.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to digress to the point that you're getting to. This is the first time I've heard all this discussion. But we made a commitment. And I think we're only as good as our word. And whether there's a signed contract or whether it's a gentleman's handshake or whatever, I think we have an obligation to go forward and give them a shot. Let them prove that we're wrong in the field of academics. I just don't see how we just back up because somebody before us sat at this table and led them down the path. And now we come along and we decide we want to do something different. And maybe it's logical. I don't know. I've not looked at the numbers. But I've dealt with a lot of people around the world, and once you give your word, you stick with it. Or if you lead them down the path where they think that you have given them your word, and then you don't, there's a price to pay for that. And it's our integrity. And I'm not willing to trash it.
And I think the state's dollars have already been invested by the development of the program, the recruitment of students, the hiring of faculty. The question is now, how do we best leverage that? And how do we ensure that that investment yields a high return versus, throwing it all away and moving on? And if there's ways to do that, that we can attach to metrics or, review it in maybe a more timely manner, then perhaps that's the question we should be focusing on.
Well, we do have about 6 weeks before we take a final action on this, and I think I hear some pretty clear directions of staff work. Is it okay to leave it pending and for us to get together and work on that in the next 6 weeks?
We can't take action on it today?
Well, you can.
I'd like to respond to a comment, if I may. You mentioned that you saw Dr. Vasquez's CV as the strongest one that's in our portfolio that we submitted. And I know wish to take away from her, but last year we hired 2 full professors. One of them was a graduate of the University of Alabama, which is the #1 educator, math educator school, and he has a pretty good vita. His name is Dr. Zhang. Dr. Cuevas came to us from Florida. We hired 2 years ago Dr. White, who has a publication record and has supervised PhD dissertations at American universities. I wonder if they're missing from what you have.
I was speaking specifically to those with degrees in math education and who were teaching the math education as opposed to the math courses.
These are all 3. White is the only switchover from, he straddles the fence between statistics and math, but he's working in the math education, and he has publications in math education.
Laurie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I completely agree with my colleagues, and I think that you all have done every single thing you've been asked to do. You've gone down the road with our staff. I don't want this to be taken as disrespectful to staff, though. I would absolutely, really never want that to happen, and I don't think any of us do. But you know, to your benefit, and you know, you've done every single thing you've been asked to do, and to your credit, you've done it with all the expectations that the end result would be an approval. I think that there are many programs within the state of Texas that would give anything to have the integrity of this program, and to punish them when there may have been some missteps along the way, whether it's former board members or former staff members or whatever. Our bottom line is STEM initiatives in this state, and there's absolutely nothing more important for us to compete in this state with other states and with other nations. And I think that if by approving this, if with all respect to our staff, if they could make sure, and you all on the other hand also make sure in a partnership, that you move forward and satisfy the concerns that the staff has, which are very real, then I think that we ought to move to approve.
I agree with that.
Have a motion? Second. Any further discussion? I'll make a comment that I also don't want to offend the staff. We rely on them. We feel like they are the experts, and we are not. But I don't see anything to lose. Get these standards written, and let's apply them in a review process. I can't see what there is to lose. Okay.
And not lose visibility on the areas of concern that you all have. You know,
absolutely.
Just not, you know, we want to have visibility into that and be able to measure that effectively. That has to be part of this.
Do you have another comment, Jeff?
One other comment, and I think we're going down the road exactly as we should. And as far as our staff is concerned, they weren't even here when a lot of these decisions were made. So, quite the contrary, I would not have anyone, hopefully, confuse the fact that we're criticizing our staff because we don't necessarily agree with the recommendation. It's just an honest agreement to disagree.
Good point. That's a good point. Yeah. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Chair Phillips, may I have
Yes, sir.
just one more thing?
Yes, sir.
I can't tell you that how important to put in place what Raymond, Coordinating Board, and the GIAC is. I can't tell you how important that is for this state.
We agree.
It's one of the most important things that we can put together. We want to be an active part of that because the accountability is what the bottom line is, and then wise investment of state resources.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
Strategic plan, we need it, but we don't have it yet.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see where we are here. Next item is 2D, a discussion and consideration of adopting a recommendation by the committee to the board for approval of a request from Texas A&M University to deliver its Doctor of Education degree with a major in curriculum and instruction via asynchronous internet delivery of classes.
I know what that means.
Okay, good for you. SAT practice. Okay, this item is still pending. The Distance Education Advisory Committee, that one's DIAC, which reviews all applications for degrees delivered by distance technology, will discuss this request again at its next meeting in February or March. And we'll get this item back to us when it's ready for committee action. Joe, you want to say anything?
Could us old guys take a minute?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's been a long time. Yeah, look, 5-minute break.
Okay.
Sorry. I just am so conscious of the 5 o'clock plane that some of them have to catch.
I think the rest of it is
Yeah. Joe, are you ready to talk about this distance education?
I am, yes.
We're still on item 2D. Do we have a quorum? Yeah, we're okay.
This is a part of our standard procedures that even an existing doctoral program, if they choose to deliver it by distance technology, has to come back to the board for approval. And the normal procedure there is to first take it to the Distance Education Advisory Committee, which is a group of experts drawn from our public institutions who are experts in the business of distance delivery, internet and video conferencing, et cetera. They met last Friday. The presentation from Texas A&M on this proposal did not satisfy the Distance Education Advisory Committee. They didn't think that Texas A&M had figured out all that they needed to figure out to deliver a program with quality through the internet. And much of that has to do with the, again, this mentoring of the research process. There's one thing to deliver a course by distance learning by internet, and quite another to mentor the students in their research for a doctoral program. So Texas A&M will come back to the spring meeting of the Distance Education Advisory Committee, and then we'll see what recommendation we have for you. But we'd suggest that this be left. We put it on the agenda expecting that they would be able to answer the question satisfactorily, and they didn't.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I guess we don't need any comments. We have another chance.
I think just leave this one.
Yeah, all right. Our next agenda item is 2E, discussion and consideration of adopting recommendations by the committee to the board for approval of mission statements and tables of programs for the following general academic institutions: Texas A&M University System Health Science Center, Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center, and the University of North Texas Health Science Center at Fort Worth. Joe, can you take us through these, please?
Surely. The table of programs is really the operative piece in these mission statements and tables of programs, because the table of programs shows what areas, what disciplines, and what levels an institution is authorized to build programs or offer programs in. And there is no change in those tables of programs, although I must tell you that in the case of the A&M Health Science Center, we've made a mistake and apparently have the wrong table in there. So we'll get that corrected for you in January. But the main point is that there is no recommended change in the scope of activities for any of these three institutions. The mission statements themselves are new language that the institutions feel would better describe their institutions to a typical reader of a mission statement, and the staff would recommend approval of them.
And we want to vote even though we don't have the right table? Or?
Yes, I think you can vote to approve the language because there is no change to the tables. But for the record, the table that's in your packet is the wrong table.
Okay. Okay, members, you've heard the staff recommendation. Do I have a single motion for all three mission statements and tables of programs?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2F is next. Discussion and consideration of adopting recommendations by the committee to the board for approval of preliminary authority requests from several general academic institutions. Joe will take us through these. The first is from Sul Ross University, Rio Grande College, for a bachelor's level chemistry program. Joe?
As I say, this is a bachelor's level. They do anticipate that some of their students would become high school science teachers with a major in chemistry if they were authorized to do this. Chemistry is a part of a core curriculum area, and it should be just a routine approval.
Questions or comments? You've heard the staff recommendation. Do I have a motion? Laurie? Seconded by Joe. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next request is from Texas A&M University Corpus Christi for a master's level degree in communication. Joe?
And this is another area, while it's not quite core, it's such a common area at the master's level in mass communications, and most institutions have such. We'd recommend it.
Questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The next two items, 2G and 2H, are pending. Joe, did you want me to go ahead and explain these even though they're pending, or not?
Given the pressure of time, I think we'll just let those go until January, if it's okay.
Okay, we can send a written description of this. Well, you have this anyway in your thing. So
I
just
think you have a written description. This is a case where we have another advisory committee that unfortunately has been scheduled some time ago for next week, so we don't have the recommendations to you yet.
Okay. Agenda item 2I and J are both from Clarendon College, and both items are requests for approval to hold elections to levy a branch campus maintenance tax. The first request, item 2I, is for discussion and consideration of adopting a recommendation by the committee to the board for approval to allow Clarendon College to hold elections to levy a branch campus maintenance tax for its Childress Center in Childress County. Item 2J is also from Clarendon College for discussion and consideration of adopting a recommendation by the committee to the board for approval to allow Clarendon College to hold elections to levy a branch campus maintenance tax for its Pampa Center in Gray County. Dr. Hill Rainey will explain these requests.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These two requests are essentially for the same thing in different locations. Clarendon County is required to come to the coordinating board to get your approval for holding an election to levy a branch campus maintenance tax, which would allow continuing financial support for a center in Pampa in Gray County and a center in Childress County. The staff recommendation on both these requests is for approval. Childress County and Gray County are both in Clarendon County service areas, so Clarendon College is the principal provider of community college programs and services for those communities. If you approve this action, the elections are expected to be held in May of 2008. And as a branch campus maintenance tax is set as a limit by law to be no more than 5 cents of each $100 of valuation of property in the jurisdiction that's taxable. The Texas Education Code requires the community college district to seek coordinating board approval to hold these elections to levy the branch campus maintenance taxes. And there is a process that's described that the college has gone through. And you'll hear about that in a minute. And then today, the board, you're being asked to determine if the proposed tax is feasible and desirable under board rules, considering the needs of the community college, the needs of the communities that would be served, and the welfare of the state as a whole. There are several steps that the college has completed in going through this process. First of all, it created a local steering committee with members from the area population, and that steering committee is working with the college. The steering committee leadership and the chair of the board of Clarendon College have filed a letter of intent with the commissioner here. And then the steering committee and the college together have conducted a feasibility study and a survey of need. And that data collection is extensive. It includes demographic and economic characteristics of the jurisdiction. It includes population trends by age group, education levels by age group, college-going data, projected growth or decline in the tax base, projected programs and services, and identification of any other institutions that could be affected. As I said, the commissioner has received letters of intent from the Gray County Steering Committee and the college leadership in August of 2007, and then in September of 2007, Dr. Paredes received a letter of intent from the Childress County Steering Committee and the Clarendon College Board. Also, the steering committees in Clarendon College in both those counties sought and received approval from the Commissioner's Court to hold the elections, and so that will be the body that holds the tax election in May of 2008. In November 2007, the coordinating board staff received the proposals from Clarendon College for both of these counties. And as I said, it included overviews of the community and demographic and economic characteristics of the community and the county, a description of the community's educational needs supported by citizen survey, and past and projected courses and programs offered. Clarendon College, to give you some context, has offered academic and vocational courses in Childress County since 1989 and in Gray County since 1972. In the fall of 2007, Childress's fall enrollment was 212 students, and Pampa had 315. Clarendon intends to use the tax to support operations at its Childress and Pampa locations, and as fiscal resources allow, to expand the academic courses and occupational programs at both those sites. And there is some precedent for this. Many times, a college will come forward in a part of a two-step process, asking first for a branch campus maintenance tax to go before its local voters and see whether or not they will provide financial support for a location, and then come back at a later time and seek formal coordinating board recognition of that particular site as a formal branch campus. That is not what Clarendon College is intending to do. These are small locations and a very dispersed population. What they intend to do is come to the coordinating board only for this step, getting approval to hold local elections to see if those communities will provide tax support through a local branch campus maintenance tax. But they are not intending at Clarendon to come back and seek formal branch campus status later on. The college did provide projected budget and income information for both sites, and if approved by the board today and the voters in Childress County, the first year's proposed tax levy in Childress County, which would be FY09, they would go for the full 5-cent tax, and the levy is estimated to generate about $88,000 in annual revenue beginning in FY09. The other institutions of higher education in that region are all over 60 miles from Childress and more than 30 miles from the Pampa location, and in any event, all are outside the college's service area. Both sites are receiving local support already. The Childress Economic Development Corporation is providing space at no cost and also providing half of the center director's salary for 2 years. And that will continue through August of 2008. And several years ago, the Pampa citizens raised funds to build that Pampa location. Clarendon has conducted high school student surveys and citizen surveys in both those counties, and based on that have identified principal academic and vocational program needs. There is great demand for higher education in this area. According to the 2000 census and the Texas State Data Center, 67% of Childress County's 7,600 residents were 25 years of age or older. 34% of those residents had earned any higher education credit at all, and 9% had attained associate's degree or higher. So you can see there is significant demand there. There is similar demand in Gray County. We have had a letter of support for the Gray County request from State Representative Warren Chisholm, and that is part of his district. You've all received additional information about the 2 sites in your blue pages, and we also have a representative here from Clarendon College, the Dean of Auxiliary Services and the Director for the Pampa Center, Mr. Ray Jaramillo, if you have questions for him. And again, the staff recommendation is approval of both of these proposals.
Mr. Jaramillo, do you have anything to add? Welcome.
I do not. Dr. Raines did a good job of presenting it to you. What we are seeking is a branch campus maintenance tax, not actually a branch campus. So that's really where we want to go forward with.
And there is precedent for this.
Right. Now, I'm just confused because I don't believe we've ever done this before. And I just wanted clarification. Are they in a service area? Is this instead of annexation? Are they annexed? Are they asking the ability to raise taxes? And if so, don't they need to have that as an annexed area? And what happens later down the line when they need INS money or facility funding, which, you know, to go out for a bond election, for example. I'm not opposed to this. I'm just confused because I don't think we've ever done this before.
We may ask Glenda to come up here and help us too, as having probably the only one who's done it before.
There are 4 other colleges that are currently doing this right now.
Oh, really?
Hill College, Frank Phillips College, Amarillo College, and Trinity Valley.
Because it seems to me that I remember the community colleges had to go to the legislature to ask for permission to have a taxing authority.
In statute, there are 2 ways community colleges can get local support. One is through annexation, through the existing district and adding property to that existing district at the voter's request with a vote of the citizens. The other option is the branch campus maintenance tax that is capped at 5 cents. And that vote has to come from the citizens in that area, and those citizens must that region must be in the service area of the college. So you would not have a branch campus maintenance tax of Austin Community College in Blinn service area. You know, it's aligned.
But if Austin Community College, instead of raising taxes the entire college, could they take that branch campus over there and just do a separate one?
If the citizens want a branch campus instead of being part of the district, they can vote themselves through this process a local branch campus maintenance tax. It gets them no representation on the board. It gets them limited services. It is not, if you're annexed, you have the expectation of representation on the board and a full service campus.
And they can't go more than 5 cents, and they can't then go for facilities or bond election or whatever.
No.
But if the part of the campus, the system, if the system has a bond election, you could still have facility money go that.
There are restrictions on how the branch campus money may be used, and there are restrictions on how the local taxpayers' money that are a part of the district may be used.
Or special assessment. It was new to me.
And they have to be kept separately.
Okay, thank you. Sure.
Part of the reason that you haven't seen this before is it's been a while since one came forward.
Brenda, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's a 5 cent cap. It can't go any higher than that?
Correct. By statute.
By statute, but that statute obviously can be changed.
Certainly.
Okay, what about when, as years go by and the need for more money, comes about, then what happens?
The region that's voted itself a branch campus maintenance tax can still agree to join the district. I mean, there is no prohibition if they decide they want to be annexed so that they are a full part of the district.
Okay, and then I don't know.
Most of the branch campuses that have the branch campus maintenance tax are located in areas away from the central location of the community college.
Well, other than maintenance tax, what are the other available funding sources
for a center such as the one in Pampa? There are in many places a local economic development tax that a portion of it can be used, and I can't remember if it's A or B, I think it's B, that they can use a portion of the tax to support education efforts. And then, of course, there are areas where citizens come together and contribute funds to build a building or provide equipment. My home county does that for the next county's community college. And so they've built a facility and put equipment in it at the expense of the citizens so that college can come in and teach, but they don't have a branch campus maintenance tax. So there are other ways that communities do get the services.
So there is a local tax base right now that could in fact be used to cover the monies that are needed, but that exists, but there's no willingness or ability perhaps to
legally they can't take the money, the local tax dollars for the people, the citizens who are currently paying taxes in the taxing district. They can't take that money and use it at one of these remote locations that are not being taxed.
Okay. Okay, so, and I'm sorry, you have to bear with me, but I'm trying to understand. So if there were no maintenance tax, how else could we get the money, other than through volunteer, funds?
That would be what the college would have to work out with the local citizens. In most cases, they use high schools and teach courses at night, or a community center that's made available to them, or someone who has a strip shopping center will make space available for the teaching. And then the tuition that's paid, of course, is used to support the salary of the teacher and whatever else is needed as administration on the campus.
And has that avenue been explored?
As I understand it, in both these locations, there are existing teaching centers, but they would like now to have it supported with a branch campus maintenance tax.
And they've had local support identified to come forward to the coordinating board to request the right to hold that tax selection. So that's why they're here today.
Voluntary contributions are stretched pretty thin.
But you are in the service area?
That's correct.
So that your students can get that discount?
Right.
Or whatever the word is.
Because they're not in taxing district.
I thought you were in the service area. You have to be annexed?
We have a service area. I think there was a Senate bill in '95 that actually aligned all the service areas for the community colleges. And Gray County falls in our service area. They're not part of Donnelly County, which is the main campus, but Gray County is part of our service area.
See, that's the way we are. But we have to pay
And those
full
students who are from Gray County right now are paying out-of-district tuition. And when they have a branch campus tax to support it, they will pay in-district tuition.
Oh, they
So
will?
it's a significant
Oh,
difference,
that
because
is
they're paying
huge.
taxes to support it.
That's a real incentive then to do it. Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question, please. Maybe you can answer it, Glenda. My Machiavellian mind is at work here. Does this grow out by any chance of the cutbacks that the governor made on funding for a lot of community colleges and so forth around the state? That's what triggered this, because Lori brought up the question. This is the first time I've seen anything like this since I've been on the board.
I do not believe that would be related to this. I think it's when a community sees that there is a need for more service than they are currently getting. That's been my experience. We've done 4 of these. And my experience has been it's when the local community is either growing or they see that their the graduates of their high schools are not going on to higher education, and they come to an understanding that it's important for their economic survival to have educational opportunities in a community, that they go the route of the branch campus. And I think it's a coincidence that you have 3 of these on one agenda. I don't think it's actually as a direct result of any specific action.
My recollection is that we were in these discussions last spring while the legislature was still in sessions.
Yeah, and by doing that, you get the in area. What is it? It's not called a discount. What is it called?
Well, it's
in-district. That's a huge advantage for their local citizens. Just tremendous.
I'd like to think they're stepping up to the bar to do their part for closing the gaps.
Yeah, thanks. All right. You've heard the staff recommendation. Do I have a single motion for both items? Laurie? Second. Seconded by Elaine. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 2K is similar to the last 2. It's a discussion and consideration of adopting a recommendation by the committee to the board for approval to allow Weatherford College to hold elections to levy a branch campus maintenance tax for Weatherford College in Wise County. Carol will take us through this, and Dr. Don Thomas, Senior Vice President for Instruction and Student Affairs at Weatherford, is here to answer any of your questions. Welcome, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Carol?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is unusual to have 3 of these at once. I think the last time one came before the board was about the year 2000, so that's why you haven't seen one before. As Dr. Phillips said, Weatherford College is seeking board approval to hold a branch campus maintenance tax election in Wise County as the first step in seeking branch campus recognition for a Wise County campus. And again, the Education Code requires them to come to the coordinating board to seek approval for this. Again, the staff recommendation on this request is also approval. Wise County is in Weatherford College's service area, so Weatherford is the principal provider of community college courses, programs, and services there. However, Wise County is not part of its current taxing district, which is why they're coming to you today. If approved, Weatherford College intends to hold the election in November of 2008. And the difference between the Weatherford College request to you today and the two previous requests from Clarendon College is that Weatherford College does intend to come back to the coordinating board later and seek a formal recognition as a branch campus for the Wise County campus. And if they were to do that, this is part of a two-step process. After the election, assuming it was that the branch campus maintenance tax was passed, the college would return to the coordinating board with additional data, additional information about the tax, the budget, how the monies would be spent, what the college is intending as part of an academic master plan, and it would come back to the board at some time after the branch campus maintenance tax election and seek approval for the branch campus status at that time. But for today, really what you need to know is and decide is if the branch campus maintenance tax is feasible and if it's desirable under the board rules. You should also know today that the Wise County, that Weatherford College has completed those process steps that we talked about for Clarendon. The Wise County Steering Committee was formed with area members, and Mr. Hinton, it was formed in October of 2005, which sort of speaks to your question, so this clearly predated any other concern. The commissioner received a letter of intent from the committee chair and the Weatherford College president, Dr. Joe Birmingham, in September of this year, indicating their intent to come forward and seek the approval to hold the tax levy election. Also, the steering committee and the college sought and received approval from the Wise County Commissioners Court, so the Commissioners Court in Wise County will be the one that holds the election for that. And then in October, the college provided the board staff with a feasibility study, and it was a very strong proposal, an extensive study that included the types of data that I shared with you earlier. Weatherford College has contacted other area institutions, Tarrant County College, North Central Texas, Texas Women's, UT Arlington, and UNT. None of those institutions had any objections or concerns about the possibility of expanding into Wise County with a permanent facility. Weatherford College has offered programs in Wise County for more than 30 years. Their fall enrollment was about 570 students in core curriculum, transfer courses, workforce education, and continuing education. The college, in its plan, academic master plan, is seeking to match the enrollment growth with the population of Wise County, and that's projected to increase from 65,000 people in 2007 to over 100,000 in 2030. Again, there is great demand for additional higher education. There are about 31,000 people that are 25 years of age or older in the year 2000 in Wise County. 24% of them had some college, but only 18% of them had earned an associate's degree or higher, and 59% of that 25-year or older population in the county had no college at all. So there is an opportunity for great growth there. The academic master plan that Weatherford has in place has been worked on with the steering committee from the county. They intend to, if the tax passes, purchase additional land and put in a two-building facility there. And there is a correction that I need to share with you for the information page, and it will be corrected in your January documentation, and that is that the branch campus maintenance tax will generate approximately $2.4 million annually in tax revenue at a 5-cent per $100 valuation rate, and it would begin in fiscal year 2010. And again, we will update that for your January materials. Dr. Thomas is here if you have any questions, and again, the staff recommendation is for approval of this.
Dr. Thomas, sounds like y'all are doing yeoman's work for closing the gaps out there.
We're certainly trying, Madam Chairman, yes. And I just want to say ditto. You all asked all those questions earlier. I thought maybe that this is ditto to the same process as to what you just previously went through. And I think it is just a happenstance that you have 3 of them on the board at this time. But,
That's very, very interesting. Questions or comments on this go-around? Got it all out?
No, I've got a lot more, but I'm going to ask Linda later. I just never knew about this avenue. This is interesting.
Your account is way too big, so there's a lot you don't know.
There you go. Hey, if it's not on the test, I don't know it.
Real quick question. What does them coming back and asking for approval for a branch campus, does it impact the vote at all, whether they, are they related?
In general, that is a 2-step process, and a branch campus has a particular meaning. It really speaks to a full-service facility, and so they will come back.
You just made a point to let us know that that was the only difference between the other two and this one, and I was just curious to see if there was anything to consider with regards to that.
Not
really,
today,
right?
no.
Okay, didn't think so.
All right. You've heard the staff recommendation. Do I have a motion?
Right. So moved.
Motion, second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion
Aye.
carries. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, for coming to see us. Okay, item 2L is discussion and consideration of adopting a recommendation by the committee to the board for the approval of the state plan for Perkins 4. The document that we all have seen is an earlier version of the state plan that was adopted November 16th by the State Board of Education, but it doesn't address the single unresolved issue remaining at that time when the state board met. That issue was the calculation to determine the percents of secondary and post-secondary funding for career technical education. Based on additional information provided at the meeting by the TEA staff, the initial recommendation for a 60% secondary and 40% post-secondary funding split was amended to a 70-30 split. The plan with the 70-30 split was adopted by the State Board of Education. Currently, the coordinating board staff and the TEA staff are reviewing the calculations used to determine the funding split. We expect to have a staff recommendation for member study before the January board meeting. However, since we've not received that staff recommendation or the final document, today I'm going to ask for a motion to table this item. But first I'll ask Joe to tell you a little bit more about this.
And I'm aware that it's awfully late in the afternoon, so we're going to try to move as quickly as we can. The U.S. Department of Education does require the states to submit a plan, and this is the plan. It's been developed collaboratively with our staff and the TEA staff. We've been jointly out in the field receiving public comments, and the document is essentially as we would expect it to go to U.S. Department of Education in April. The big issue remaining is this 60-40, 70-30, 50-50, whatever split, and the issue there is one of being sure that we in fact are counting students the same way in both the secondary and post-secondary systems, the students or the student contact hours, and there are 2 different kinds of systems. We collect data in different ways, and we're just not sure at the moment that we've got it right. So I think you can look at the rest of the document if you see anything that's of concern, but it's pretty much a standard kind of process and procedure for joint development and joint review. But rather than have you take an action on it today, I think we need to resolve this remaining issue.
Do I have a motion to table the item?
So moved.
Second? Okay, motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign, and we table the motion. I mean, table the thing. Whatever. Table the item. I appreciate your motion. Item 2M is a discussion and consideration of adopting a recommendation by the committee to the board relating to amendments to section 4.28 and 4.30 of board rules concerning the Texas General Education core curriculum. Joe will explain the amendments.
There's been some sense in the field that algebra is the only way you can meet the math core curriculum requirement. That was never the intent. but we thought the language needed to be clarified so that it was clear that, say, a course in introductory statistics or in symbolic logic was an acceptable way to meet that, and particularly as statistics and data analysis become more important, as you heard earlier in college readiness discussion, we think this language will take away some ambiguities that may have been there.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Any questions or comments? No? Do I have a motion? So moved. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Items 2N, O, P, and Q are discussion and consideration of adopting recommendations by the committee to the board relating to the reviews of Chapter 8, Chapter 9, Chapter 10, Chapter 11 of Board Rules. As you know, these reviews are completed every 4 years as required by Section 2001.039 of the Texas Government Code. I'll ask Joe to tell us about these reviews, and if there are no objections, we'll treat them all four as a single action.
And these are just a reaffirmation that these rules are appropriate. It's the same kind of thing that in the earlier committee meeting this morning you did on a couple of chapters.
You've heard the staff recommendation. Do I have a motion? So moved. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Next is item 2R, a summary of compliance notification resulting from institutional effectiveness evaluations of associate degree grading institution. Joe?
And we were just talking about the Carl Perkins Act. Under the current Carl Perkins Act, and it will actually be strengthened some in the future, there is a requirement for continuous review of programs at institutions, and we do an institutional effectiveness at the staff level and then report to you on the colleges that have successfully completed, in this case, Frank Phillips, Temple, and Texas State, West Texas, and this constitutes that compliance report.
Any questions or comments? We don't have to take any action, right, Joe?
No, this is just a report for the record.
Move to not take any action.
Don't confuse me. I'm sorry, Lynn. Item 3 is a discussion of the programmatic aspects of funding items on the Agency Operations Committee agenda. This is not an action item for our committee. There are 2 topics in this item, A, which is about Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Funds, and B, which covers grant awards under the Minority Health Research and Education Grant Program and the Nursing Allied Health Other Health-Related Grant Program. Joe?
As I recall the last meeting of agency ops, I believe it was Mr. Hinton that said that we should make sure that programmatic things are brought to the programmatic committee, so that's what we're trying to do here.
Great, Joe. Thanks.
I just didn't know it was on the agenda yet, because I'm not even going to talk about that until tomorrow.
The first one of these is a reallocation of money that's remained unspent at the end of the fiscal year, and we're recommending that it be reallocated following the same formula, same criteria as before. The other is awards of some health research grants and some nursing and allied health programs. These are tobacco funds, and again, it's the same kinds of procedures we've used in the past on those competitive grant process, and those will go before agency ops. So we can discuss them, or we can move on. Your choice.
I think I know what the choice will be. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Joe. Now, everybody hang in here, because our last item is really an important one, and Joe and his staff are going to discuss their activities and projects, and we need to hear all of this.
Well, I was concluding that we didn't need to hear it all, and we'd send you some papers so that you could see
This is the second time we've postponed. Whatever.
My flight, so go ahead.
Whatever you want. Whatever you
Your choice. We could certainly send you, we can mail out to you as the bullet points that they were going to speak from.
Well, could you at least introduce them?
Surely. Dr. Vanessa Davis has been handling the Applied Baccalaureate Special Task Force. Applied Baccalaureates are the Bachelor of Applied Technology, the Bachelor of Applied Arts and Sciences, and in other states, the Bachelor of Applied Science. her committee is making good progress, and we'll hear from her another time if we may. The course drop limitation, the 6-course drop legislation that I know many of you have heard about. Dr. Catherine Parsoneau is working on that project and working closely with the TACRO, is the Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers, and they're making good progress working with us. You know Roger Alford, and we commented earlier about the Graduate Education Advisory Committee. Mr. Brigger, I think you were the one that asked about dual credit at the last meeting, and Dr. James Goldman has been doing a survey. He's gotten responses from, I think, 67 institutions. They've identified some problems, as I mentioned this morning, and I think they're working on them, and we can hear from him. A related one I didn't mention this morning was the Northeast Texas Network, which is an alliance of institutions in the Northeast that are working to increase the supply of teachers by taking people with a baccalaureate level and giving them an additional 18 hours in the field so that they can teach college-level courses. And so there's an interesting project going on there that may very well get copied elsewhere fairly quickly.
They need to apply for the Star Award. Yeah, so others can see it.
That's a quick run, and the folks are here. If you want to ask them questions, we'll send you their notes.
They're all going. Please do send us the notes. We'd love to have them. We appreciate the work. Okay, this concludes the business of the Committee on Academic Excellence and Research. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, you do.
I didn't even ask for a motion. The main qualification to being chair of this committee is being able to read for a long time. Read out loud. You do a great job. Great. You're not always
I mean, I had a 5 o'clock.
I'm staying. Sorry about not taking a break.
Oh, is it meeting tomorrow?